Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the worst jobs in history, the ones that reeked of filth, fear, and flaming torches, and yet somehow people lined up for them. You're standing in a narrow cobblestone street. It's eerily quiet. The air is thick with the sour tang of rot and smoke. Behind you, a wooden cart creaks with each step, weighed down by the unmistakable burden of human bodies. They slump together like forgotten sacks. The bell in your hand jingles as you call out the phrase that's haunted the city for weeks now. Bring out your dead. You're a plague cart driver. Congratulations, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there on the other side of the world at 2 a.m. too tired to sleep. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You didn't dream of this job. No one did. But when the Black Death swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, someone had to clear the bodies. It turns out, corpses don't move themselves, and entire cities, London, Florence, Paris, were drowning in the dead. That's where you come in, not as a noble doctor or brave knight, but as one of the few still healthy or desperate enough to haul the dead to their mass graves. You start before dawn, not because it's strategic, but because the sun's heat accelerates the smell. The city around you is cloaked in fog, but it doesn't hide the stench. You push your cart through alleys where shutters slam shut when they hear your wheels. You're not just a worker, you're a grim omen. The cart isn't fancy. It's a basic wooden flatbed on 2 wheels, pulled by you, or maybe a mule if you're lucky. More often than not, the mule has already died. You carry a bell in one hand to warn people you're coming, and sometimes a long hooked staff to pull bodies out of homes or ditches without getting too close. Of course, this safe distance is meaningless. Germ theory won't be invented for centuries. You've probably already inhaled the plague, whether from fleas, rats, or just the rank air. Historians still argue whether plague workers like you were official city employees, church volunteers, or simply hired hands from the bottom of society. Some were criminals given the job in exchange for a pardon. Others were widowers, desperate for coins. It didn't matter who you were before. The moment you took this job, people started avoiding you like, well, the plague. Now let's talk logistics. Every house you pass, someone might flag you down. My mother passed last night, they whisper, pointing at a bundle on the floor. There's no ceremony. You lift her by the arms, her skin mottled with purple splotches, and heave her onto the growing pile. If you're especially unlucky, a family might throw the body from a second-story window to avoid contact. Yes, that really happened. Sometimes you find bodies in the streets. Or worse, ones that aren't quite dead. Stories circulate of people gasping awake just as they're about to be tossed into the communal pit. Is it true? Maybe. Historians debate whether mass grave sites were really checked thoroughly. Some accounts suggest survivors did claw their way out. You try not to think about it. Once your cart is full, you trundle out to the edge of town, to a trench dug in haste. There's no priest, no final words, just the dull thud of one more body hitting the pile. You dump, cover, and go back for more, all day. And if you're wondering whether anyone bothers to thank you, no, not really. You're more tolerated than appreciated. There's a common belief among the townsfolk: if you handle the dead, you're already dead. Some people spit when you walk past. Others leave out bread or wine, quietly, like an offering to a living ghost. You eat alone, if at all. Sometimes your meals are stolen from the carts of the deceased. Not proud, but hunger doesn't ask for permission. The job has fringe perks. You get paid, barely, usually in copper, or food, or lodging in abandoned homes. Some plague drivers loot the dead. It's not legal, but in a world collapsing from disease, who's enforcing the rules? One man's cursed necklace is another man's dinner. The physical toll is obvious. You're lifting dead weight all day, in heavy wool clothing. Your feet blister, your hands crack, your back seizes by sunset. The emotional toll, though, that sneaks up slower. 1 week in, the bodies start looking the same. 2 weeks in, you stop asking names. 3 weeks, and you can't remember the sound of birdsong. Now and then, someone jokes about the irony. Your job is in high demand. It's stable work, just deeply unstable for your immune system. And the best part, there's no retirement plan. You either drop dead or vanish when the worst passes. No statues, no stories, just a rumor about the man with the bell and the cart, still heard rattling down empty lanes at night. And here's the kicker. Cities needed you. Without plague cart drivers, the death toll would have been far worse. Unburied bodies led to rats, flies, more infection. Your role, vile as it was, saved lives. Not that anyone put that in writing. There's one fringe story, possibly apocryphal, of a man in Milan who became a local hero after organizing systematic corpse collection, personally burning thousands of bodies outside the walls. He wore garlic around his neck and blessed his own cart before each run. Did it work? Maybe, or maybe he was just lucky. Either way, you push your cart through the fog. The bell tolls, and someone, somewhere, whispers a prayer you'll never hear. You've made it through another long day of corpse hauling, and somehow, you're still upright. But as dusk falls and you stagger past shuttered homes, the stench of your job still clinging to your skin, something even more pungent seeps into the cobblestones below your feet. Human waste. You follow the smell into a narrow alley and pause at a crumbling wooden hatch in the ground. From within it rises a man, his face blackened with filth, his boots squelching as he climbs out of the city's bowels. Tonight, you've been reassigned. You're now a Tudor gong farmer, and your shift is just beginning. Let's start with the basics. The term gong doesn't mean a literal musical gong. It comes from the Old English gang, meaning to go, and yes, that's exactly the kind of going you think. A gong farmer was a night worker hired to remove human excrement from cesspits, privies, and public latrines in England, especially in Tudor cities like London. And not just remove, it had to be hauled by hand into barrels, tubs, or carts, and taken out of town before sunrise. Why did this job exist? Simple. Medieval sanitation was a tragic comedy. In theory, people had latrines, either private or shared. In reality, these filled up fast and were often just pits under a wooden bench. Left too long, they overflowed. Enter the gong farmer, the sewage savior nobody wanted to talk to during the day. Your tools are basic: a long-handled scoop, a shovel, a thick leather apron, if you're lucky, and a wheeled tub. Oh, and don't forget the waxed cloth tied over your nose. Not that it helps. The air in a cesspit is famously noxious, full of miasma, the medieval belief in bad air that spreads disease. Historians still argue whether miasma had any protective function, since it may have encouraged workers to limit time in hazardous areas, but it sure didn't stop them from dying young. You work strictly at night, not for drama, but because of laws. Gong farmers weren't allowed to operate during daylight in most towns, partly due to the smell, and partly to keep them out of public sight. In other words, you're a necessary evil, vital to urban life, yet reviled while doing it, kind of like a modern IT guy during a power outage. Except you're knee-deep in poop, and no one ever says thank you. So what's your nightly routine like? First, you knock on doors, usually privy owners or taverns. Some cesspits haven't been cleaned in years. You lower yourself through a trapdoor or hatch, descend a crude ladder, and stand inside what is essentially a pit of human sewage, mixed with straw, kitchen scraps, dead rats, and sometimes unfortunate cats. You begin scooping. It's hot, it's thick, and it burbles. The smell is, well, there's a reason this job made even gravediggers gag. Every few scoops you have to lift your bucket up to your partner, who dumps it into the cart. By the end of the night, you'll have removed hundreds of gallons of waste. You then cart it out of the city, often to fields where it's dumped as fertilizer. Hilariously, a hot commodity. Yes, your byproduct is quite literally in demand. Farmers line up for the stuff. It's full of nitrogen. The irony, the same thing that makes you gag, is what helps feed the people who gagged at your presence. There's one quirky upside. Gong farmers earn surprisingly good wages, far above what a blacksmith or carpenter might earn. Some even grew wealthy enough to own land. A few became powerful enough to form unofficial guilds, charging high rates for pit cleaning and hiring out teams like sanitation mafias. A dirty monopoly, if you will, but it comes with costs. First, your health. You inhale toxic air, suffer skin infections, risk collapsing into pits too deep to escape from, and regularly get scratched by hidden debris like broken pottery or glass. Many died not of disease, but of injury or suffocation. Sometimes the ground beneath a cesspit caved in, taking the worker with it. Imagine your co-workers seeing only a bubbling surface where you once stood. Second, your reputation. Gong farmers were untouchables in every sense. Children made jokes about you. Women crossed the street. You couldn't attend church unless you changed your clothes and bathed, something you didn't always have time or means to do. Even the pub barkeep might slide your ale across the bar without making eye contact. There's a surviving record from 1610 of a man named John Stowe, who wrote about a team of gong farmers whose cartwheels broke mid-street, spilling filth of such abundance that it ran down the hill into shops and homes. The city fined them, and a new ordinance was passed that cess carts had to be inspected weekly. It didn't help. People still fell into them. Sometimes you discover bizarre things. Jewelry lost in privy holes, or bones, some human. One report from Norwich in the 1500s details a gong farmer who found an infant skeleton presumed to be a murder victim. So yes, your night job might also qualify as accidental forensic work. And yet, the demand never dropped. Cities grew denser, toilets stayed primitive, and the job, however disgusting, had job security. It was too essential to ignore. In a weird way, you become part of the city's living rhythm. Every alley you clean, every pit you empty, it's a service the nobles won't talk about, but desperately need. And now, as dawn nears, you trudge outside the walls, the sky just turning pale behind the church spires. You dump the last cartload onto a steaming compost mound and rinse your arms in a foul-smelling stream. The birds chirp, the city waits, and you vanish back into its shadows, nameless and necessary. You wipe the sweat from your brow, though honestly it's probably not just sweat, and think, maybe tonight's work will smell a little less like doom. But no such luck. As evening fog rolls in and church bells mark the hour, you're already on your way toward the outskirts of the city, where a different kind of cleanup job awaits you. This time you're stationed at the execution grounds of Ming Dynasty China, working as the person no one talks about, the execution ground cleaner. It's the early 1400s, and you live in one of the world's most powerful and bureaucratically obsessed empires. The Ming Dynasty has reinstated strict Confucian order, revived the civil service exam, and unfortunately for you, brought back a rather theatrical approach to public punishment. Executions here are often spectacles, meant to inspire obedience and fear, and someone's got to tidy up after the message has been sent. That someone is you. Your day, or rather your night, begins just before dawn. That's when the last sword falls, and the crowd disperses, murmuring about whether the condemned really deserved it. You, on the other hand, are already stepping onto the crimson-stained execution platform, mop in hand, trying to decide whether it's easier to start from the neck pile or the ankle side. Let's pause for a little context. Ming China's justice system was deeply hierarchical and heavily reliant on ritual and demonstration. Punishments ranged from floggings and banishment to executions, including beheadings, strangulations, and the infamous death by 1,000 cuts, lingqi. Historians still argue whether lingqi was as widely practiced as records claim, or if it became exaggerated by later writers and colonial observers. Either way, even standard executions weren't clean. Now imagine your job isn't to judge, nor to execute, but to make the whole thing vanish by sunrise. You arrive at the field, often just beyond the city gates, where the condemned have met their fate. There may be blood pooled around wooden blocks, organs strewn nearby. Yes, it happens. And in some cases, relatives weeping over a severed head. Your task is to clear everything: blood, body parts, bones, emotional residue. Optional. Your tools are a ragged broom, water buckets, sawdust, lime, and strong hands. Lime is critical. It reduces odor and helps prevent disease. The Chinese knew this, even without modern germ theory. But there's no protective gear, no gloves, no boots. You're often barefoot or wearing simple straw sandals. If you cut your foot on something, you treat it with herbs and prayer. The worst days are festival seasons. Executions sometimes coincided with public holidays, a grim reminder from the state that you'd better behave. On these days, the audience triples. People eat snacks while watching. Some take home bits of rope or clothing as souvenirs. And when it's all over, they leave behind trash, trampled footprints, and the faint stench of blood-soaked earth. You're not just a cleaner now, you're the janitor of state-sponsored horror. Your co-workers. You might work alone, or with a small team. Often the role is passed down in families, especially among low-status groups known as jianmin, literally base people. These included performers, animal skinners, gravediggers, and yes, execution site cleaners. You're born into it, and society expects you to stay put. And yet, it pays. Like our gong farmer friend from the last section, your work is dirty but essential. The city magistrate needs you. The guards like that someone else handles the mess. You're paid in grain or copper, and some weeks, even given meat as a bonus. You might even live on site, in a shack nearby, next to the lime barrels and worn-out mops. One fringe tale often passed around is about a cleaner who became an accidental folk hero. Legend says he discovered a still-living man among the bodies and secretly nursed him back to health, defying the execution order. Some versions claim he was caught and executed. Others say he became a monk. There's no hard evidence, but it highlights how blurred the lines were between duty, horror, and humanity in this job. Now back to you. As the sun begins to rise, you pour water across the packed dirt. The blood thins into a dark smear. You toss sawdust, then sweep. A handless arm rolls your way. You try not to look. You lift it, drop it, into a shallow fire pit, and toss on a little more kindling. It's not about respect anymore, it's logistics. By midday, this ground has to look like it never happened. And here's the bizarre twist. People envy you. Not openly, of course, but they do. Why? Because you work near power. You hear whispers from soldiers, magistrates, even passing officials. You know which noble offended the emperor, which merchant paid off whom. Information clings to your clothes like ash. You're invisible, but you see everything. There's even a fringe belief that the blood of the executed has medicinal value. Some sneak into the field at night to scoop up soil, thinking it can cure epilepsy or ward off evil spirits. You catch them sometimes, desperate grandmothers, wide-eyed boys, and wave them off without a word. Sometimes you wonder about the condemned, who they were, what they did. Whether they screamed, but you don't ask. Asking makes it harder to sleep. So you mop, scatter lime, burn what must be burned, and fade into the haze of the rising day. And just like that, your work is done. Until tomorrow. The sun's higher now, casting a golden shimmer across the dust-cloaked city streets. You stretch your aching shoulders and breathe in. Well, try to. After cleaning blood off the execution field, your nose is too stuffed with smoke and iron to appreciate much of anything. But there's no rest. Your next job comes with even more smoke, and it pays in prestige and the persistent smell of death. You are now an Egyptian embalmer, working deep inside a tent of linen walls, tucked behind a temple in New Kingdom Thebes. The air is thick with incense. But don't be fooled, that sweet scent is covering something much, much worse. Let's be clear, this isn't a common gig. Embalmers were part of an elite group of ritual specialists in ancient Egypt. Your job wasn't just technical, it was sacred. You handled the bodies of the dead, preparing them for eternity. That made you both revered and feared. Revered, because you worked closely with priests, and were considered a conduit for divine transition. Feared because, like the gong farmer, you dealt with things most people didn't want to even think about. The process of mummification was long, gruesome, and disturbingly precise. You start by meeting the family. Depending on their wealth, they've chosen a package, budget, mid-tier, or high-end. Yes, funerary options were tiered even then. The wealthiest got the full 40-day treatment, ornate sarcophagi, and layers of resin and gold leaf. The poor, a quick dip in natron and a few basic wrappings. Once the body arrives, it's stripped and laid out on a low stone table. You begin with the brain. Using a curved metal hook, you enter through the nostrils, smashing the ethmoid bone to reach the brain cavity. Then you stir the brain until it liquefies and drain it out through the nose like a smoothie. This part isn't shown in temple murals. After that, it's time for the organs. A cut is made along the left flank, and the liver, stomach, intestines, and lungs are removed. Each one is individually treated and stored in canopic jars, each guarded by a specific deity. The heart? That depends. Historians still argue whether the heart was always preserved or sometimes removed, contrary to popular belief. Some texts suggest it stayed in the body as the seat of the soul. Others say it was swapped with a sacred stone. Nobody agrees. Meanwhile, the body cavity is rinsed with palm wine and stuffed with linen soaked in resin. Then it's covered in natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture that draws out moisture. You leave it like that for 40 days, not in a pristine chamber, mind you, but in your tent, near the riverbank, covered in flies. The smell is unbearable. Even the incense can't hide it fully. Now, a word on the workspace. You're not operating in some grand temple hall. The embalming tent, called the able, is semi-public, often visible from the road, but separated by screens or walls. People walk by covering their mouths, muttering prayers. Occasionally, someone tosses you an offering to ensure their relative's soul finds peace. More often, they just glare. When the drying phase is done, you return to the body. You oil it, wrap it in linen, sometimes hundreds of feet of it, and apply amulets between layers. Some families insist on specific spells from the Book of the Dead, which you or a scribe might recite aloud. If they're rich, the deceased is painted, gilded, and placed in multiple nested coffins. If not, it's one wooden box with a crude face carved in haste. But no matter the wealth, the expectation is the same. The body must be recognizable to the soul, in the afterlife. You are, in a sense, preserving identity. If you botch the job, too much shrinkage, a broken jaw, missing eye, you're not just making a mess, you're ruining eternity. So no pressure. There's a peculiar social tension to your work. While priests and scribes may nod at you in temple courtyards, they rarely invite you to dinner. You deal with the liminal, the in-between space of death. It makes people nervous. You're cloaked in spiritual authority, but also smell like resin, bile, and whatever that mystery goo was inside the stomach jar. It sticks to your skin, your hair, your bedsheets. Still, you're in demand. Death is constant, especially during plagues, war, or one of those, oh, the Nile didn't flood again. Years, families line up outside the tent. Some beg for discounts. Others slip you extra coin to sneak in a forbidden amulet, or write down their own spell. You've seen it all. Wives whispering about their husband's sins, sons demanding the heart be removed just in case. You nod, take the coin and follow tradition. One quirky detail about embalmers. They wore jackal masks during certain rituals, symbolic of Anubis, god of mummification. You don't just clean and preserve, you perform. You're channeling divinity. You whisper prayers, hold the knife with your right hand, and make exact cuts, not just for hygiene, but for cosmic balance. And when it's all done, you walk the body to its tomb. Sometimes you're part of the funeral procession. Other times you hand it off to porters and return to your tent to wash the day's work off your hands, with water that probably came from the same river where crocodiles cool off. Sanitary? No, but nobody asks. As night falls, you sit outside the Ibu, watching stars rise over the dunes. You've helped another soul cross into the afterlife. You've inhaled enough natron dust to pickle your own lungs. And tomorrow, there'll be another family, another set of organs, another chance to preserve a legacy or destroy it. All in a day's work for an embalmer. The wind shifts as you leave the embalmer's tent behind, carrying with it the lingering tang of spices and death. You blink against the rising dust, hoping the next job just maybe won't involve body fluids. A naive hope. Honestly, because now you're stepping through the tannery gates of 14th century Paris, where your nose is instantly overwhelmed by a stench so aggressive it could win a duel. Congratulations, you're now a medieval tannery apprentice, and the air smells like boiling hooves, rancid lard, and human urine. Let's start with the why. In the Middle Ages, leather was indispensable. belts, shoes, book covers, water skins, saddles, armor. If it needed to be tough and flexible, it needed to be leather. And leather doesn't just grow on trees, it starts with raw animal hides. And your job is to transform those bloated, hairy slabs of cow skin into smooth, durable material. You do this through a process so foul, so gruesome, so weirdly popular, it boggles the nose and the mind. Tanneries are usually built downwind and downstream, because no one wants to live next to one. Your workplace is a cluster of stone pits and wooden vats, each filled with some hideous cocktail of organic ingredients. The first step, curing. You receive the hides from the butcher, often with chunks of flesh still attached. These must be scraped off with a two-handled knife, while the skin is laid over a beam. You lean in, slicing away dried meat and fat, while flies land by the dozens and your arms burn from repetition. Then comes the hair removal. This part's special. You soak the hide in a solution of human urine, collected from local households and purchased in bulk. It's not just to be gross. The ammonia in urine helps loosen the hair follicles. After several days, you drag the hide from the vat and scrape off the hair. The smell is so sharp, it makes your teeth ache. Here's where it gets worse. To soften the hide, you next toss it into a dung pit. Often dog dung, sometimes pigeon. The enzymes help break down the tougher fibers. You stomp the hides with your bare feet to make sure it soaks evenly. Yes, you stand barefoot in a bucket of poop and old skin, while pigeons watch from the rafters like tiny judgmental gods. Historians still argue whether medieval tanners truly had to use dung, or whether cleaner alternatives were available, but less effective. Either way, the recipe stuck around for centuries. Why mess with a classic, right? Once the hides are soft and hairless, you rinse them in the nearby river, which is now so full of runoff, sludge, and rotting flesh, it's a wonder the fish haven't unionized. Then comes tanning, where the hides are soaked in vats of oak bark, sumac, or other tannin-rich plant materials. This step can take months, and involves flipping the hides regularly and making sure no air pockets form. Your day-to-day life as an apprentice is brutal. You're up before sunrise and work until long after sunset. You lug water buckets, stir vats, scrub tools, and haul hides that weigh more than you do. You eat standing up, your hands always stained brown and green. You don't even notice the smell anymore, except when you walk into a clean room and everyone suddenly finds a reason to leave. Socially, you're somewhere between essential craftsman and unholy stink demon. People want your product, but not your company. Some even believe that prolonged exposure to tannery fumes causes madness. Others think you're immune to disease, because nothing else could possibly survive the smell clinging to your skin. There's a fringe story of a tanner who became a hero during a plague outbreak. While the city's wealthy fled, he stayed behind, handing out leather water bags and boots. When asked why, he allegedly said, "Death won't come near a man who smells like me." Nobody's sure if that's true, but no one wanted to get close enough to argue. Occasionally, you'll get a brief moment of pride. Maybe you see a knight ride past in a saddle you helped prepare, or watch a friar open a leather-bound manuscript you dyed yourself. These moments matter. They remind you that beneath the stink and the stains, you're crafting something meant to last. But they're fleeting, because just as often, you're dumping out a hide vat and realizing something went wrong. Maybe it got moldy. Maybe someone added too much lime. Maybe rats fell in. You sigh, drag the ruined skin out, and start again. And oh, the lime. Let's talk about that. Before urine, before dung, you sometimes use a lime solution, a powerful alkali that burns skin and corrodes fingernails. You stir it with a wooden paddle and hope none splashes on your face. Too much exposure and you'll end up with raw patches of skin or a cough that never quite goes away. Lime's effective, it's also cruel. Despite all this, tannery apprenticeships are sought after. Why? Because a master tanner is wealthy. He owns land, employs others, and sells high-end leather to nobles and merchants. If you survive long enough and don't go blind, lose your sense of smell, or get run out of town by neighbors sick of the stink, you could become one of them. You dream about that some nights. A small workshop of your own. Cleaner vats, maybe a decent pair of boots, But for now, you're still scrubbing dung off your shins while a dog pees on the tannery wall and your master yells at you for soaking the hides too long. And the best part? There's a new shipment of cowhides arriving tomorrow. Lucky you. You peel off the crusted leather apron, your hands dyed in hues nature never intended for skin. As the tannery fades behind you, your lungs almost thank you for the new air, until you catch a sharp metallic scent drifting in from the city square. The crowd is gathering. Children are perched on crates. Bakers pause mid-dough. Everyone is staring at one thing: the guillotine. Today, you're not watching, you're working. You're now a guillotine blade sharpener during the French Revolution, and your job is to make sure the head comes off in one clean go. Let's rewind for context. It's the 1790s, and France is in the throes of revolution. Heads are rolling, literally at an astonishing pace. Enter the guillotine, that oddly efficient and disturbingly democratic execution device, introduced as a more humane alternative to hanging or axe beheading. Joseph Ignace, Guillotine himself, promoted it as a painless way to deliver justice, and the French government agreed. The crowds, they love it. But behind the crisp drop of every blade is a craftsman like you, quiet, precise, and very, very good at keeping steel sharp. Your workstation isn't far from the platform, often in a shed or basement behind the execution site. Your primary tool, a grindstone powered by a foot pedal, though some upgraded setups use water wheels or even horse-driven power. The blade is curved, heavy, and wide, around 40 kilograms of steel. Your job is to maintain the perfect angle, balance, and polish. Any flaw, nick, or dullness risks a botched beheading, and trust me, no one wants that. Especially not the guy being beheaded. Historians still argue whether guillotine blades required sharpening after every execution, or just daily. Some records suggest they dulled quickly under frequent use. Others hint that regular oiling and cleaning kept them serviceable for dozens of drops. Either way, no one likes surprises. You start your morning inspecting the blade. Any rust, any warping. You lift it carefully onto the grinding mount and begin pedaling. Sparks fly. The air smells of scorched iron and sweat. You test the edge by dragging a strip of cloth across it. One stroke, it should cut clean. If it frays or snags, back to the wheel it goes. You're not officially an executioner. That's a different, more theatrical role. But you are indispensable. The headsman's fame rests partly on your skill. If the blade stutters mid-drop, they'll blame him, sure, but they'll look at you. And no pressure, but this is Paris, and crowds are judgy. They want a clean show. Executions are public entertainment. Vendors sell cider and cakes. Kids chant "off with his head" in little sing-song voices. They cheer when the blade falls fast. They groan if it hesitates. In a strange twist of history, your blade sharpness is now a form of customer service. You keep your tools simple: a whetstone, cloths for oiling, a leather strop for polishing, and the occasional animal fat for rust prevention. The guillotine blade is stored in a special wooden cradle lined with wool, meant to protect its edge. You're one of the few allowed to handle it directly. It's a symbol of revolution, but to you it's just steel, hungry, heavy, unforgiving. There's a fringe rumor that blade sharpeners were paid in wine, or if the prisoner was a noble, in gold slipped under the table. No one knows for sure. What's clear is that sharpeners made decent money, but earned almost no respect. You were invisible unless something went wrong, and things did go wrong. One infamous incident involved a poorly sharpened blade that took multiple drops to finish the job. Witnesses claimed the victim screamed after the first strike, a detail that sparked fresh debates about whether the guillotine was truly painless. Did the head remain conscious for a few seconds? Could eyes still see? Lips still move? Historians still argue, citing everything from muscle twitch studies to spooky anecdotes. You try not to think about that while you work. Instead, you hum. It helps drown out the crowds. Maybe you chat with a carpenter who maintains the frame. Maybe you sip wine from a tin cup and count how many nobles are left in the neighborhood. It's dark humor, but in these times, laughter is currency. Then it's time. You help the assistant slide the blade into place. The executioner gives you a nod. Not warm, not cold, just professional. The crowd hushes as the condemned is led up the stairs. The man's eyes dart to the blade, maybe even to you. You look away. The blade drops. Cheers are up. Another tally mark in your mental ledger. You return to your shed, cloth in hand, and begin wiping down the edge. It's still good. Still sharp. Tomorrow, you'll check it again. You might even adjust the weight slightly. Some believe a heavier drop gives a cleaner cut. You disagree. You believe in precision, geometry, respect for the steel. One quirky note: the guillotine's introduction was supposed to symbolize equality, a clean death, no matter your birth. Before, nobles got swords, peasants got ropes. Now everyone gets your blade. Somehow that makes you part of the great leveling force of history. You just wish it didn't smell like metal and fear. You finish your work as the sun dips below the rooftops. The blade rests in its cradle, gleaming faintly in the candlelight. It's ready for you. The clinking of steel fades behind you, and for a moment, you think surely it can't get worse. But then your chest tightens, your eyes sting, and you realize you've just crawled inside a chimney. You're now wedged between bricks, in total darkness, your knees tucked to your chest, your breath scraping through soot-thick air. Welcome to your new life as a Victorian chimney sweep boy. You're about 7 years old, maybe 9 if you're unlucky enough to have survived this job more than a couple of years. It's 1840s London, or Manchester, or Liverpool, and your boss is called a master sweep. He probably picked you up from an orphanage, a workhouse, or off the street. Technically, it's employment. Realistically, you've been sold into soot-covered servitude. The job? Clean chimneys from the inside? Yes, inside. Not with brushes from below, not with tools from the roof. No, you shimmy up the flue barefoot, shirtless and coated in soot, and scrape the walls clean with a metal scraper strapped to your wrist. It's pitch black, barely wider than your shoulders, and the bricks are still warm from last night's fire. Let's add some historical context. In the early industrial age, coal became king. Chimneys got narrower, but more essential. Every household and factory needed theirs cleaned regularly to prevent fires. Mechanical brushes existed, but many flues were too winding or narrow for them. Enter you. Small, agile, expendable, the perfect tool for a rapidly sootifying world. You start before dawn. Your master sweep rouses you with a kick or a cold bucket of water. No breakfast unless you earn it. You're marched into town with a bundle of soot rags and told which house to enter. The client smiles at your master, pretends not to see you. He's the professional, you're the equipment. At the fireplace, you're pushed up into the opening and told to get on with it. You start climbing. The walls are slick. The heat from previous fires still radiates through the bricks. Your knees scrape. Your fingers bleed. You cough, but there's nowhere to spit. You inch higher, shoving soot down below with every push. Sometimes, the flue narrows unexpectedly. You stop. You wiggle. You whisper a little prayer. Getting stuck is a real risk, and not just metaphorically. There are multiple accounts of boys dying mid-flue. The term climbing boys was common, but stuck boys became a grim nickname in chimney sweep slang. Your tools are primitive: a scraper, a small brush, a sack to catch soot. Some boys wear knee pads, made of sackcloth, but most just use bare skin. You don't even get gloves. If your master's kind, he lets you use a blanket during winter. Otherwise, your own body heat will have to do. And then there's soot wart, a type of scrotal cancer that became so common among chimney sweep boys, it was the first industrially recognized occupational cancer. Yes, you're not only risking your limbs and lungs, but your literal future. Historians still argue whether early medical professionals understood the link between soot and cancer, or just blamed bad hygiene. Either way, the boys knew something wasn't right. The weirdest part: the public loved the results. A clean chimney meant better fires, less smoke in the parlor, fewer house fires. Your suffering made afternoon tea just that much cozier. Some even believed that chimney sweeps brought good luck. Brides would pay to be kissed by one on their wedding day. Imagine that, people dodging you in the street, then paying to touch your filthy face for superstition. Occasionally you get paid directly, a copper coin, or some bread crust from a grateful housewife. But it all goes to your master. He controls your food, your sleep, your freedom. You sleep in the soot cellar or curled next to the hearth. If you complain, he beats you. If you cry, he laughs. If you get stuck, he lights a fire to smoke you out. Yes, smoking out was real. Some boys died from it. And yet, people lined up to take this job. Or more accurately, were lined up by desperation. Families with too many mouths to feed. Orphanages that needed fewer beds. Workhouses under pressure to reduce costs. Your body was small, and that made you a commodity. Still, not everything is cruelty. There's camaraderie among the other boys. You learn songs, whistle codes, ways to mark tricky flues. If you're clever, you trade soot, a valuable fertilizer, for apples at the market. You develop calluses on your hands and lungs. You grow fast, or you don't. One quirky record tells of a sweep boy who escaped his master, disguised himself in noble rags stolen from a drying line, and lived in a church belfry for weeks, sweeping chimneys in secret for food. Did it really happen? Maybe. Or maybe it was just a story sweep boys told themselves to fall asleep. Eventually, if you survive long enough, and that's a big if, you get too big for the flues. Then what? Maybe you become a journeyman sweep. Maybe you get a street job hauling coal. Or maybe you're tossed aside like the brush you used to be. It's worth noting that child labor laws eventually changed everything. In 1834, Britain introduced limited protection for child workers. By 1875, using climbing boys was outlawed entirely. But by then, generations had already lived and died in the soot. For now, you slide back down into the hearth, your face blackened, your lungs burning, your knees shaking. Your master gives you a nod, not praise, just a signal that you lived through another chimney, and tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You've crawled out of the flue covered head to toe in soot, and you're hoping maybe, just maybe, the next job will let you breathe fresh air. And it does, sort of. It smells like incense, sweat and blood. You're no longer in London. You're in Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, standing at the base of a towering stone pyramid that's been washed red too many times to count. Welcome to your new role, Aztec Temple Blood Scrubber. Your job is simple: clean the temple steps after sacrifices. The practice is part of one of the most iconic and controversial ritual traditions in world history. The Aztecs believed that the sun god, Huitzilopochtli, needed nourishment in the form of human hearts and blood to keep the universe in balance. Without regular offerings, the sun would stop rising, crops would fail, and chaos would return. Now someone has to deal with the logistics of all that blood. That someone is you. You're not a priest, and definitely not a noble. You're one of the workers assigned to maintain the grandeur of the Templo Mayor, the twin temple complex in the capital city, where thousands gather to witness ceremonies. The structure itself is massive, each step a slab of stone that bakes under the midday sun, and when the sacrificial blade is lifted, the blood doesn't stay neatly on the altar. It pours down those steps, turning them into slippery rivers. You arrive after the last heart has been raised to the sky, the drums have stopped beating, and the crowd begins to scatter. Sometimes, your work begins while the line of captives still stretches down the stairs. Each one ascends with shaking knees, and you know exactly how it ends. The priests work fast. You work faster. Let's talk about how this all goes down. The sacrificial victim, often a prisoner of war, but sometimes a volunteer, is led up the stairs, made to lie back on a stone slab and held by 4 assistants. A 5th priest wields the obsidian blade. With a practiced motion, he slices open the chest and removes the heart, offering it to the sun. The body is rolled down the stairs, sometimes bounced intentionally for theatrical effect. By the time you arrive, the steps look like someone overturned a butcher's stall. Your tools: buckets of water, rough fibered brooms, maybe a sack of sand or lime. You begin scrubbing the hot stone, using all your weight to push the blood into channels carved into the steps. The Aztecs were advanced engineers. They understood water flow, drainage, and sanitation. But no design can make this job pleasant. The sun is blinding. The smell, thick, metallic, cloying. You gag the first few times. Eventually, you just stop breathing through your nose. This job is strangely prestigious, within limits. You work at the heart of the empire. You hear the priestly chants. You walk the same steps as emperors. But nobody looks you in the eye. You are, functionally, a walking mop. And yet, the job has perks. You're fed by the temple kitchens. You sleep inside the compound walls. And if you do well, you might graduate to groundskeeper, or even a priest's assistant. It's a long shot, but still, historians still argue about the scale of these sacrifices. Some Spanish accounts claimed thousands in a single day, but many modern scholars believe those numbers were inflated. Propaganda meant to paint the Aztecs as savages. Realistically, major ceremonies might involve dozens or hundreds, especially during festivals like Talacaspehuelistli, the flaying festival. Yes, it's what it sounds like. Flaying, by the way, creates a whole other cleanup issue. During certain rituals, the skins of the sacrificed were worn by dancers or priests for days, then discarded. You might find yourself gathering them from doorways or altars, then burying or burning them under moonlight, gagging all the while. One fringe detail that tends to get overlooked. Some sacrifices included blood painting, priests using blood to draw symbols on walls, floors, and even statues. Guess who gets to clean that up? That's right, you, with water, sand, and elbow grease. And if you scrub off the wrong part of the mural, that's a punishment. One involving lashes or exile. You work mostly in silence. The temple is rarely quiet. Even at night, wind whistles through the carved stone serpents. Sometimes the priests chant in low tones. You hear the rustling of feathers from the high priest's headdress. You hear rat. There's one story, half joke, half truth, that temple workers like you leave offerings of their own. Tiny flowers or pebbles, hidden in the cracks between steps. A way of saying please, not me next. Whether the gods care or not, who can say? But you still place your little flower every evening, just in case. And here's the cruel twist. While this job is dangerous, dirty, and deeply unsettling, there's a constant line of applicants. The empire needs the temples spotless. Cleanliness shows respect. It reflects the divine order. And for some, being close to the divine, even at the lowest rung, is better than being forgotten in the maize fields. You finish your shift, just as the sky turns orange and pink. The stone steps shimmer cleanly now, no trace of the morning spectacle. You pour the last bucket of water, push your broom into a corner, and sit on the top step, breathing in the scent of incense rising from the plaza below. Tomorrow, the drums will sound again, and you'll be waiting with your broom. The sun rises again, golden light spilling over temple steps now scrubbed of blood. You squint, hoping for a less gruesome assignment, and at first glance it seems you've landed something ordinary. A factory, a simple desk, not quite. You're now inside a matchstick factory in 1888 London, and the air smells faintly sweet, like candy and death. Welcome, you're a Victorian matchstick girl, and every day your bones die a little faster than your dreams. Let's set the stage. It's industrial-era Britain. Factories line the smog-choked streets, and inside one of them, you and dozens of other girls, some as young as 13, sit at long wooden benches. Your job: dip tiny pine sticks into a pale yellow paste and set them to dry. That paste is white phosphorus, and it's about to ruin your life. Matches were a miracle invention. Portable fire anytime, anywhere. The demand was enormous, and factories like the Bryant and May matchworks in London were booming. But the production process was deadly. White phosphorus is highly toxic, especially when handled daily without gloves or ventilation. Guess what you don't have? Exactly. Your day begins early. The factory whistle blows before dawn. You file into a low-ceilinged room, the air thick with phosphorus fumes. You wear a simple smock, no safety gear, no masks. You sit shoulder to shoulder with other girls, some humming songs, others already coughing. You dip, 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 stick after stick. It's hypnotic, mechanical. The paste glows faintly in the dark. Some girls call it devil's butter. It cakes under your nails and clings to your fingers. You're told not to touch your face. You try, but eventually you scratch your cheek, or wipe your nose, or bite a fingernail. And that's when the real danger starts. Soon your teeth begin to ache, then your jaw, then the swelling. The condition is called phossy jaw, and it starts with infection and ends with necrosis. Your jawbone literally begins to rot, emitting a sickly sweet smell. Your face swells, your breath becomes unbearable. In advanced cases, the jaw must be removed entirely, without an aesthetic. Doctors wrap what's left in cloth, and you're sent home to heal, or not. There's a morbid saying among match girls: if your mouth glows in the dark, your clock's ticking. One girl in the corner sings softly. Her face is already swollen. The others pretend not to notice. But here's the strange part. People wanted this job. Why? Because it paid. Not well, but enough. Better than begging. Better than factory sewing or domestic servitude. You got a hot meal. You were indoors. You were part of the modern workforce. Even with the danger, there was a twisted sort of pride. You could help your family, buy a ribbon, maybe dream of a different life. Your supervisors don't talk about safety. If you ask for protection or complain about toothaches, they'll dock your pay or fire you. There's always another girl waiting outside the gates. And those songs you sing while you work, they're not just for fun, they keep the fear away. Some are nursery rhymes reworded for the factory floor. This little match went to market. This little match stayed home. You sing softly while your hands keep dipping, your fingertips tingling. Now for the science. White phosphorus vapor enters the body through the mouth or nose. Once inside, it disrupts bone metabolism and blood supply. Over time, it leads to severe, irreversible damage. Historians still argue whether factory owners knew the full extent of the harm or simply didn't care. The evidence suggests a little of both. One fringe tidbit: some match girls used to light their matches on their own teeth to impress boys in the street. A flick, a spark, a quick grin. Romantic in theory, terrifying in hindsight. In 1888, things finally changed. Sort of. A group of match girls at Bryant and May staged a strike, a bold, coordinated walkout protesting low pay, fines, and working conditions. The media picked up the story. Public outrage grew. After weeks of pressure, the company caved to some demands. Slightly better pay, a less brutal fine system, and promises of reform. But the phosphorus, that didn't go away immediately. Safer alternatives like red phosphorus existed, but were more expensive. It wasn't until 1906, at an international convention in Bern, that white phosphorus matches were finally banned in many countries. Too late for you though. For now, you finish your shift, fingers sticky with paste, head aching from fumes. You wash your hands in cold water, no soap, and nibble the stale bread the forewoman throws your way. You joke with the others because if you don't laugh, you'll scream, or cry, or simply fade out like so many others already have. Outside, the gaslights flicker. You walk home with glowing fingertips and a coin or two in your pocket. Enough for rent, enough for a little food, maybe enough for a bright red ribbon to wear in your hair. It won't make you safer, but it makes you feel alive. For now, you wrap the red ribbon in your hair and step out into the foggy streets of 19th century London. The glow of phosphorus lingers in your breath like a dying star. But at least your feet are on the ground, until suddenly, they're not. Now you're aboard a Byzantine warship in the 7th century, lurching through the choppy waters of the Mediterranean, and someone just handed you a handheld flamethrower. You are now a Byzantine fire siphon crew member, and your job is simple: don't burn your own ship down. Welcome to the wild world of Greek fire. Let's start with what we know. Greek fire was a terrifying incendiary weapon, developed by the Byzantine Empire, probably around the 7th century. It could burn on water, cling to ships and men alike, and resist most known methods of extinguishing. The exact formula, a tightly guarded state secret. Historians still argue over what it actually contained. Possibilities include naphtha, quicklime, sulfur, and resin, but no one can say for sure. Whatever it was, it worked too well. You're part of the siphonariae, the specialized crew assigned to wield this nightmarish substance. You don't make it. That's someone else's job, probably locked away in a secure chamber somewhere in Constantinople. Your role is more hands-on. You wake up in a hammock slung beneath the ship's deck, to the sound of waves slapping against wood and the creak of leather armor. You check the siphon, a metal tube mounted at the bow, connected by pipes to a sealed bronze container in the hold. The pressure system is primitive but effective. When primed, it can spray fire 20 feet forward, engulfing enemy ships in moments. Your task is to keep the nozzle clean, the seals tight, and the pressure just right. Oh, and to fire the thing while enemy archers try to turn you into a pincushion. The worst part? You've never tested it safely. There's no practice day. You only ever learn to use it in real combat. When the call comes, usually a bell or the thud of a distant drum, you rush to your station. The admiral barks commands in Greek over the clamor. The enemy is sighted, Saracen ships, sleek and fast, cutting across the waves. You grip the siphon handle and brace your feet. A crewmate begins cranking the pump. You feel the rumble in the pipe. The heat. You light the ignition wick, likely sulfur and pitch, and shout the warning. Then, whoom! A gout of flame erupts from the nozzle, catching the wind like a demon's breath. It lands on the enemy ship's sail, then clings, refusing to die. Men scream, water splashes, the fire spreads, and yet you're not cheering because your wick is too close to the hull. The spray angle is slightly off, and there's now a tiny flame licking the edge of your own sail. Cue panic. You grab a damp cloth and slap it at the sparks, shouting for more water. There's none, just salt spray, smoke, and the terrible knowledge that Greek fire reacts to water like a toddler to bedtime, aggressively and with zero respect. One scholar's theory: quicklime in the mix might have created a chemical exothermic reaction with water, making it burn hotter. Others argue that petroleum derivatives allowed it to float and spread. Whatever the case, you cannot let it touch your ship. Your crew carries emergency sandbags and asbestos-like cloths, soaked in vinegar, one of the few known ways to suppress a Greek fire accident. You douse the edge of the flame, hold your breath, and somehow it dies. Your ship wobbles intact. Barely. Then you do it again and again. Each time your heart pounds like a war drum. You know one misstep means the entire deck could vanish in seconds. You've seen it happen. Ships burst into flames so fast that crew members barely make it overboard. And if you fall in wearing armor, that's the end. Your uniform is padded leather, soaked in oil-resistant resin. It doesn't help much. Your eyebrows are singed. Your hands are blistered. You wear a scarf around your nose to block the fumes, which smell like tar mixed with despair. Yet, strangely, you're proud. Your weapon is feared across the Mediterranean. Arab sailors whisper about it in markets. Crusaders talk about liquid fire as if it were sorcery. And here you are, operating it. There's a fringe tale of a siphon operator who deliberately turned the weapon on his own mutinous crew after they tried to steer the ship into Roman territory. His nickname? The Flame Judge. Probably a legend, but nobody in your crew is eager to test it. Still, you're expendable. If the pressure valve explodes, you're the first to go. If a spark hits the siphon barrel, boom, no ceremony, no honor guard, just another scorched plank in the sea. You rinse the nozzle with wine after every battle. It's the only liquid you trust near the thing. Your supervisor, a half-blind veteran with only 2 fingers on his left hand, watches you work and mutters something in slurred Greek. Probably, don't screw up. By sunset, your ship limps back to port. You scrape the soot off your gloves, unbuckle your armor, and sit on the dock, watching the orange sky mirror the flames you've hurled all day. You're still shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. And maybe somewhere deep down, from pride. The Empire calls it a secret weapon. You call it Tuesday. The docks still echo with the hiss of burning sails as you stagger inland, hoping to leave fire behind for good. But now the air grows dense with smoke of a different kind, one that doesn't just singe your skin, but clings to your soul. You're walking through a town with windows boarded up, the streets eerily quiet, and the sky grey with ash. You are now a medieval plague cart driver, again, but not as a lone figure pushing a rickety wheelbarrow down London's alleys. This time, it's 1348, and the Black Death has reached its crescendo. You're part of a municipal response. Your cart is heavier. The lines of the dead are longer. The city has stopped pretending everything's fine. You've been promoted, if you can call it that. Let's talk about what this job really entails, now that the plague has turned catastrophic. First, the context. In the 14th century, the Black Death, likely a combination of bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic plague, swept through Europe, killing somewhere between a third and half of the population. Towns and cities were overwhelmed. Entire families vanished in days. Infrastructure collapsed. Food supplies withered. Clergy fled. And through all of that, the one profession that somehow remained in demand was yours. The cart driver. You wake before dawn to avoid the worst heat and the worst stairs. Your cart is large now, reinforced with iron bands, and creaks under its own weight even before the first body hits it. You walk the city circuit, the bell in your hand barely ringing above the moaning wind. Bring out your dead, you call. Again, again, the words lose meaning after the first week. People do bring them out, wrapped in blankets, tied at the wrists, sometimes stacked like firewood at the end of the lane. Some weep, some won't even open the door. You've seen bodies tossed out of windows to avoid infection. One noblewoman shoved her own brother down the stairs and slammed the door. You didn't ask questions. You took the body. The plague moves fast. Bobos the size of apples, high fevers, blackened skin, blood from the mouth. Sometimes they scream until their lungs collapse. Other times they just stop breathing mid-sentence. And sometimes you get to the body before it's fully dead. A twitch, a breath, an eye half open. Historians still argue how often plague victims were buried alive. But you know, you've seen it. You wear layers. Not for protection really, just to create distance. Layers of wool, a scarf soaked in vinegar, a leather hood. It doesn't work. The fleas find you anyway. Your arms itch, your eyes burn. The cart reeks sweet, sour, fungal, rotten. You dump quicklime on the bodies to slow the decay, but it only delays the inevitable. There's no time for names, no records. You rarely know who you're collecting. In the beginning, you tried to remember, gave them nicknames, said a little prayer. But the streets are so full now that bodies block the road. You roll them aside with your boot and move on. The burial pits are outside the city, plague trenches, dug hastily by convicts or desperate peasants. Some are 10 feet deep. Others are just ditches covered with straw and soil. You dump the load. Maybe you cover them, maybe not. Some pits overflow. You've seen dogs gnawing at the edges. You shoo them off with a stick, muttering an apology you don't really mean. And here's the kicker. You're envied. You have steady work. You're still standing. You're fed by the city. Barley bread, wine, sometimes cured meat. Your boots are newer than most. People watch you with fear and resentment. Some think you've made a deal with the devil. Others think you're immune. You don't correct them. The truth is, you don't know why you're not dead yet. One fringe theory you hear whispered from scholars: people like you, constant handlers of the sick and the dead, developed accidental resistance to certain strains. Maybe something in the blood, maybe divine favor, maybe luck. Historians still debate the genetic immunity idea to this day. You don't think about it much, you just keep walking. Sometimes, someone tries to bribe you. Take her somewhere nice, they say, pressing coins into your palm. Or don't put him in the trench with the beggars. You nod. You take the money. But there's only one pit. The pit doesn't care about status. You hear rumors of people surviving, of plague doctors arriving with beaked masks and pouches of herbs. You saw one once. He looked like a crow. You laughed. Then he collapsed 10 steps later, and you loaded him into your cart with the rest. At night, you dream in color, vivid reds and purples, blood, bruises, robes, fire. You dream of bells ringing and doors slamming, of black ships arriving in harbors, of rats dancing in alleys. You don't remember the last time you dreamed about your own face. One day, you arrive at a house that's strangely quiet. The door creaks open. Inside is a single body, sitting upright in a chair, as if waiting. You don't move. You feel the air change. There's a smell you don't recognize, something new. Your skin crawls. You back out, shut the door, and walk away. Some things don't need an explanation. Still, you keep working. Your cart creaks, the wheels wobble, your bell tolls, you hum, a little tune, one you used to hear in the taverns before they all closed. You can't remember the words. And then, one day, the bodies slow down. A few less on your route. The trench fills slower. The city begins to make noise again. Horses, laughter, a hammer on wood. You wonder if it's really over. But you keep the cart ready, just in case. You wipe your hands on your tunic, though they're already stained with things that never fully wash out. You think back to quieter work, maybe something with coal, perhaps. But as you step into a dim, soot-thick hall in 1905 Pennsylvania, you realize your next job involves sitting still and slowly falling apart. Welcome to the coal breaker, where you're one of the youngest workers in America's most dangerous industry. You are a breaker boy, and your fingers are your only tools. Let's start with context. It's the early 20th century, and the Industrial Revolution is in full swing. The appetite for coal is endless. It powers trains, steamboats, factories, and homes. But not all coal is created equal. Before it can be used, it has to be cleaned, sorted by size, and stripped of impurities like slate and rock. That's where you come in. You're about 12. Though some boys here are as young as 8. You work in a breaker, a tall wooden building that shakes and rattles with machinery. Inside, tons of raw coal cascade down chutes from nearby mines. Your job is to sit on a wooden plank beside a moving conveyor belt and pick out the junk. That's it. 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, sitting, picking, bleeding. You don't wear gloves. They slow you down. You use your bare hands to grab sharp chunks of slate, toss them aside, and keep the coal moving. Your fingernails split. Your skin cracks. Your knuckles bleed. You press on. The air is thick with coal dust. It coats your teeth, lines your lungs, and scratches your throat. You cough constantly, but you've learned to do it quietly so you don't miss a rock. Above you, the older boys and foremen shout orders or curses. Below you, the coal moves fast enough to break a finger or take one clean off. You've seen it happen. Your clothes are simple: shirt, trousers, cap. Nothing fancy. The dust clings to everything. You stop feeling clean after the first week. Some boys stuff cotton in their ears or nose to keep the grit out. Doesn't help much. Now for the odd part. This job is in demand. Why? Because your family needs the money. A breaker boy might earn 60 cents a day, enough to buy food or keep the rent paid. In coal towns, the mining company owns the homes, the stores, even the schools. You live in company housing. You buy goods from the company store, and your wages go straight back into their pockets. Still, it's a job, which is more than many have. Historians still argue about the health consequences faced by breaker boys. While black lung is typically associated with miners, studies suggest that even these younger surface workers suffered lasting damage: respiratory issues, stunted growth, hearing loss. But back then, nobody tracked your symptoms. You just coughed and kept picking. There's a fringe story about one boy who worked so long and so fast he could sort a ton of coal in an hour using just 3 fingers, having lost the others in a belt jam. They say he trained himself to grip with his knuckles. It might be legend, but the missing fingers, all too real. Your day starts before the sun's up. You grab a cold biscuit or chunk of bread, then walk to the breaker in the dark. By the time the machinery roars to life, you're already numb. Not just from the cold, but from the routine. Coal in, slate out, don't fall in. The belt doesn't stop for lunch. You eat with one hand and sort with the other, and the sound, it's a constant roar. Clattering, crashing, shouting. Some boys go partially deaf within a few years. You learn to read lips or just nod along. One boy near you, Tommy, maybe, used to sing while he worked, something cheerful. She'll be coming round the mountain. One day, he slipped trying to reach a bigger piece of slate, fell into the chute. No one talks about it. His name was never mentioned again, but you still hear the echo of that song some nights. You're not supposed to nap, But some boys doze off mid-shift, their hands keep moving out of habit. That's how deep the rhythm goes. You don't talk much at home. You come back filthy, exhausted, too tired to speak. Your mother tries to scrub your hands clean. It never works. The coal has stained your palms, your nails, your knuckles. It's become part of you. The breaker has no future for you. If you grow big enough, you go down into the mines. Where the air is worse, the pay is slightly better, and the danger multiplies. Roof collapses, gas leaks, explosions. But hey, at least you're not sorting rocks anymore. The government eventually steps in. In 1916, Congress passes the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act, attempting to regulate child labor in mines and factories. But enforcement is weak. Companies resist. Boys still work the breakers into the 1920s, some as late as the 30s. But for you, now, in 1905, it's still business as usual. The belt moves. The rocks fly. You reach. Sort. Toss. You don't know if tomorrow will be different. You only know your shift ends when the whistle blows. And you get to go home with soot in your ears, blood on your knuckles, and coal dust lining your dreams. Just like always, you leave the coal breaker behind, your fingers raw and your lungs wheezing like bellows, and step into the cool tile corridors of a grand palace. Candlelight flickers off golden trays and marble walls. Velvet slippers shuffle past, and incense wafts in sweet spirals. For a moment you think you've made it, clean, elegant, quiet. But then a eunuch hands you a steaming cup and nods. Taste it. Congratulations. You're now an Ottoman palace coffee taster, and your survival depends on your sense of taste and your luck. Let's set the scene. You're in Topkapi Palace, seat of the Ottoman sultans in the 16th century. It's a city within a city, lavish halls, secret courtyards, hidden kitchens. The sultan lives here, along with his concubines, his advisors, and his personal staff, numbering in the thousands. Every person is carefully chosen, monitored, trained, and occasionally replaced. Your job is as straightforward as it is terrifying. Taste the sultan's coffee before he does, just in case it's poisoned. Coffee in the Ottoman Empire wasn't just a drink, it was an art form, a status symbol, and in royal circles, a potential weapon. The sultan drank it daily, slow brewed in a long-handled sezver, thick with grounds, fragrant with cardamom or clove. And you're the last line of defense between him and a painfully dramatic death. You weren't born into this job. You were selected. Maybe you started as a kitchen boy. Maybe you served in the outer courts. Maybe you impressed the right cook with your graceful way of handling a tray. Either way, you're here now, in the café au dessus, or coffee chamber, where the finest beans are ground with mortar and pestle, boiled over charcoal, and poured into delicate porcelain cups. Each cup goes through you first. You sip, wait, smile, hope. Then the sultan takes his. It's not that poisons were common, just feared. Political enemies, jilted concubines, rival viziers. Everyone had a motive, and a cup of coffee is an intimate moment. That's what makes it vulnerable. Historians still argue how often real poisoning attempts occurred. The palace records are vague, but Ottoman court culture was so steeped in intrigue and paranoia, even the possibility of poison justified your job. You're trained to recognize symptoms: a bitter aftertaste, sudden dizziness, a tightening throat. You've studied herbs, toxins, and antidotes. You carry a small charm in your robe. Maybe it's superstition, maybe insurance. You've also likely seen what happens when poison does slip through: retching, convulsing, silence. Sometimes it's not even poison, just spoiled milk. But that doesn't matter. If the sultan frowns after a sip, everyone in the room freezes, including you. There's a fringe tale of a coffee taster who, upon recognizing a poison too late, chugged the entire cup to save the sultan's life, then calmly bowed and walked out to die in the garden. Probably not true, but it's the kind of story the palace likes to tell. Dramatic, loyal, memorable, and conveniently unconfirmable. The coffee itself? Glorious. Thick, dark, strong enough to make you forget the danger, almost. You've become a connoisseur. You know which beans are from Yemen versus Ethiopia, which roast is too bold, which sugar blend pairs best with rosewater. It's ironic, you drink better coffee than 99% of the empire, and every cup might kill you. Still, this job has status. You're part of the inner service. You wear fine robes, stand in gilded halls, and rub elbows with viziers and concubines. You know secrets. You hear rumors. You've learned to keep your face neutral, and your lips sealed. You also sleep lightly. Poison isn't limited to cups. Rival tasters, envious servants, anyone might want your place, or to ensure you don't return for tomorrow's tasting. You live by rituals. Wash your hands. Smell the beans. Taste the foam. Let the ground settle. Wait 15 seconds. Watch your body. You develop tricks, small doses of known herbs to build up resistance. A sniff before the sip. A drop to the tongue rather than a gulp. No one tells you these rules. You learn them by watching who didn't survive. And yet, people want this job. Why? Because if you live, you rise. Some coffee tasters became head butlers, diplomatic envoys, even trusted advisors. The palace respects loyalty, and there's no greater loyalty than risking your life over a morning beverage. You might be elevated, promoted, retired to a villa with your own garden. If you live long enough, that is. One quirky detail. You develop a permanent caffeine tremor. Your hands twitch slightly. Not from fear, but from tasting 5, 10, sometimes 15 cups in a single shift. You rarely sleep. Your dreams are jittery. You see coffee grounds in your soup. You wake up tasting cardamom. Still, it's better than the mines, or the battlefield, or the sewers. You tell yourself that, as you lift the next cup, you bow, you sip, you smile, and you wait. You lower the tiny porcelain cup with shaking hands, pulse buzzing like a swarm of bees. You're alive again, and that means you get to keep your job another day, but not for long, because you're now standing barefoot on sun-baked stone, holding a mop fashioned from tree fibers, staring at a court stained with something that definitely used to be inside someone. You are now the arena cleaner at a Maya ballgame, and it's your job to tidy up after ritual sport with possible human sacrifice as the after-party. Let's ease in with the setting. It's pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, sometime around the 7th or 8th century, and you live near a grand ceremonial center, maybe Copan, maybe Chichen Itza. At its heart is the ball court, or telact, a long stone corridor flanked by sloped walls, often decorated with carvings of serpents and skulls. It's the site of a sacred game, pits or pok-ta-pok, played with a solid rubber ball weighing up to 9 pounds. The goal, get the ball through a stone ring mounted high on the wall, without using hands or feet. Sounds hard? It is. The ball can bruise ribs, dislocate hips, and shatter bones. But the game isn't just for sport, it's ritual theater, full of cosmological symbolism. The players represent celestial bodies, the game reenacts creation myths, and depending on the occasion, the losers or sometimes the winners are offered to the gods. Now guess who cleans the court after the gods have had their tribute? You do. You're not a player, you're a temple worker, somewhere in the social middle, above slaves, below priests. You live in a small stone house near the court, wake with the sun, and report to your supervisor, usually a feather-draped elder with a voice like crushed gravel. You bring a gourd bucket, a straw broom, and a mixture of crushed lime and water. The lime is mildly antiseptic and helps lighten bloodstains. You'll need a lot of it. The court itself is an echo chamber. Shouts and footsteps bounce off the walls. When games are over and the nobles and priests have left, you enter with your tools. You start by clearing leaves, feathers, and occasionally teeth. Then you get to work on the darker patches, splatters along the walls, smears where bodies rolled, the telltale puddles at the center of the court. Yes, sacrifice is part of your cleanup routine. Historians still debate whether the losing or winning team was sacrificed. Some argue it was a high honor, granted to the champions. Others think the losers were punished. Likely, the practice varied by time, city, and specific ritual purpose. Either way, someone usually bled on the stones, and you get to clean it. You've developed techniques. Water first, to lift the blood. Lime scrub, next, then a sweeping rinse. You work barefoot, so you don't slip. The ball court isn't just a floor, it's an altar. It must be spotless before the next game, or the gods will notice. And speaking of gods, there are many. The game honors Hunhanopo, the mythic hero of the Maya underworld, who played a cosmic version of this very sport. His decapitation in the underworld is reenacted every time a player kneels at the end of a match. Your job is to clean the story out of the stone. Your social life is limited. People don't greet you on the street. You smell of lime and sweat. Your hands are permanently pruned. Children whisper that your feet never dry. You're not quite feared, but definitely avoided. Still, the job has layers. You see things no one else does. You hear the high priests murmuring before dawn. You find charms hidden under court stones, tokens from desperate players or hopeful nobles. Sometimes you leave them be. Other times you pocket them. You've got a little stash, a carved jade bead, a piece of obsidian, a feather that might be Quetzal, and occasionally, rarely, you speak to the players. One boy, maybe 15, still shaking from the match, once asked you, was it enough? He meant the blood. You didn't answer. What could you say? You're just the mop guy. But he looked relieved anyway, like maybe your silence was divine approval. There's a fringe legend of a court cleaner who became a player after a last-minute injury. He knew the court better than anyone. He knew how the ball bounced, where it stuck, where the cracks ran. He scored the winning shot and was sacrificed on the spot. A perfect ending, or a cautionary tale. Your hands are calloused, your back aches, but you're fast, efficient, and strangely, you're respected in quiet ways. A priest might nod your way after a festival. A player might leave you a roasted maize cake. You get paid in food, shelter, and the occasional pair of new sandals. Better than nothing. And here's the twist. Some people volunteer for this role. Not often, but once in a while, someone approaches the temple offering to sweep the court. Not for money, but to be close to the sacred, to feel the heartbeat of the ritual. You understand, this job is more than dirt and blood. It's memory. It's myth. It's maintenance of the cosmos. Even if most days it just feels like cleaning up after a fight club with too many gods. As the sun dips below the city's temples and the air cools, you pour the last rinse across the stone. The blood is gone. The court gleams. Tomorrow, the game begins again, and you'll be here waiting. The cheers of the ball court fade behind you, replaced by silence. A still, sticky silence broken only by distant shellfire and the slow, sucking sound of your boots in the mud. You're no longer barefoot. You're wearing stiff leather that leaks at the seams. It's 1915, and you're in northern France. The smell hits you first. Mildew, unwashed bodies, something worse. You're now a WWI trench latrine digger, and your office is a pit full of despair. Let's step into the boots. Carefully. World War I trenches were engineering marvels of a grim sort, designed to protect soldiers from machine guns and artillery. They zigzagged across the European countryside for hundreds of miles. But with protection came a whole new challenge: how to handle waste. You're not in charge of the guns, the maps, or the food. You're in charge of the latrines, the places where hundreds of soldiers relieve themselves day after day, week after week, without ever rotating more than a few hundred yards. Sanitation is your domain, and it's somewhere between necessary and nightmarish. Your job begins with a shovel, a long-handled trenching spade that you carry like a badge of rank, except your rank is the kind people don't talk to during meals. You're told to find a dry spot. That's optimistic. Everything is soaked. The soil is clay. The rain never stops. Rats follow you like co-workers. You dig anyway. The latrine is a misnomer. In theory, it's a straddle trench, a narrow ditch just wide enough to squat over. In practice, it's often a wooden box with holes, hastily nailed together and placed over the most drained ground you can find. You build screens for modesty when you can, but usually there's no time or materials. Everyone pretends not to look. Once the pit fills, and it always fills, you shovel dirt over it, mark the spot, and dig another. That's your rotation. Dig, cover, repeat. On a good day, the latrine lasts a week. On a bad day, it floods overnight and spills into the trench. That's your job too. You carry buckets of lime when they're available. The lime helps reduce smell and bacteria. But it clumps in wet weather and burns your skin. You spread it anyway. The stench is always there. Damp wool, diesel, rot, and the unmistakable acid tang of human waste. You get used to it, or you don't, doesn't matter. The shovel doesn't care. There's a weird honor to your work. Trench hygiene was critical to survival. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, these weren't just threats, they were inevitable without latrine control. One bad latrine setup could infect an entire company. You're not just digging holes, you're saving lives. One reeking pit at a time. Still, no one shakes your hand. Historians still argue about how trench sanitation was managed across different armies. The British, for example, were more organized early on. The French adapted as they went. The Germans built deeper, more elaborate latrine systems, sometimes even with roofs. But for you, it's all mud and improvisation. You work in all weather. Rain turns everything to soup. Snow just freezes the waste. Summer is somehow worse. Flies arrive in swarms. They coat the latrine walls, buzz in your ears, land on your food. You stop swatting. You just eat faster. Your nickname? Maybe the digger, or something less polite. You laugh it off. If you're lucky, someone shares a cigarette. If you're really lucky, the supply officer gives you fresh socks, because standing in slurry without foot protection leads to trench foot, a rotting infection that starts with numbness and ends in amputation. You've seen more of your comrades' backsides than faces. You've heard every joke, every groan, every curse, whispered from a cold wooden seat. You've had to fish things out, helmets, watches, even once, horrifyingly, someone's lunch tin. You buried it. You didn't ask. One fringe tale circulates about a soldier who hid contraband liquor in a latrine pit, thinking no one would dare search for it. When the officers found out, they made him retrieve it with his bare hands. He did, and then drank it anyway. True? Possibly. WWY was full of decisions no sober person would make. You keep records, quietly, which latrines fill fastest, which posts are most prone to collapse. You try to rotate locations, but there's only so much space. Eventually, the entire trench smells the same. You learn to breathe shallowly through your mouth. You learn that silence isn't peace. It's just the lull before another shell lands. Shells don't care about sanitation. Every so often, while you're waist-deep in digging, an artillery round hits nearby. Dirt showers down. You curl into a ball, shield your face. Then you get up and go back to it. There's always another pit to dig. Oddly, some men admire you. Not openly, but in the way they nod as you pass. The trench sergeant knows your work prevents outbreaks. The medic gives you a ration bar when no one's looking. You don't get medals. You don't expect them. You'd settle for dry boots. By the time your shift ends, you're soaked, sore and slightly less human. You rinse your hands in a metal basin, smear a dab of carbolic soap on your forearms, and collapse into your dugout. Sleep comes quickly. So does the next shift. You hear a soldier joke. They say the latrine's the cleanest spot in the trench. At least we know where the filth is. You smile. Because it's true. The trench is behind you, and with it go the boots caked in filth and the stench of war. You take a deep breath, cool, earthy, and oddly sweet. There's no gunfire, no shouting. Just the gentle creak of a cartwheel and the slosh of something heavy in clay jars. You're in Edo period Japan, and you're no longer a soldier or a peasant. You're a night soil collector, and your job is to haul human excrement through the streets, with grace. Let's ease into this delicately. It's the 18th century, and Edo, modern-day Tokyo, is the largest city in the world. Over 1 million people packed into a wooden maze of streets, temples, tea houses, and merchant shops. There's one thing they all have in common. They use the toilet, and someone you has to make sure those toilets don't overflow. Welcome to the Chozuba economy, where human waste isn't just refuse, it's valuable fertilizer. The Japanese were pioneers in urban sanitation, long before most European cities figured out the basics. Rather than dump waste into rivers or streets, they collected it, stored it, and sold it to farmers who used it to enrich their fields. Night soil, called shimago, was a booming business, and your job, weird as it sounds, was vital to the urban-rural balance. You work at night, slipping through the alleyways with a wooden yoke balanced across your shoulders, two ceramic pots hanging by ropes, each filled with that day's harvest. You wear simple robes, your feet in straw sandals. A cloth wraps your face, not for secrecy, but for the smell. And yet, this doesn't feel like a low-status job. You're clean, methodical. People even nod to you politely, though no one offers a handshake. Your route is the same every night. Tea houses, boarding inns, wealthier homes with indoor squat toilets. You knock gently, announce your arrival with a soft gumin kudasai, and swap out full jars for empty ones. Some customers leave tea and rice cakes out for you, a quiet thank you. It's not always easy. You've got to carry 60–80 pounds of liquid cargo across uneven cobblestones, avoiding drunk samurai and curious cats. If a jar cracks, it's not just embarrassing, it's financially disastrous. You pay the household for the soil, and if you spill it, you eat the loss. That's right, you buy poo. Historians still marvel at the economic logic of Edo's waste management system. Households were paid small sums for their waste, creating an incentive to store it neatly. Collectors like you paid up front, then resold the waste to farmers in nearby provinces, sometimes making a decent profit. In some neighborhoods, rights to collect night soil were fiercely guarded and even auctioned off. You're not a random street worker. You're part of a tightly regulated network. You even wear a badge on your sash, identifying your district and route. Other collectors nod respectfully as you pass. You exchange stories: which houses have the best product, who's behind on payment, which farmer is offering the best price per bucket. And yes, there's a quality rating system. Not all night soil is equal. The best comes from people with rich, varied diets: tea, rice, fish, pickled vegetables. Wealthy homes produce premium grade, cheap sake and barley lead to less desirable stock. You learn to tell by the color, consistency, and unfortunately smell. Your biggest fear? Tipping over. There's a fringe story told in taverns with a grin about a night soil man who slipped on ice outside a geisha house. The jars burst. The geisha screamed. The man vanished from the city by sunrise. Some say he changed his name and moved to Osaka. Others say he was cursed by a fox spirit for being too clumsy. You've come close yourself. Wet cobbles, bad rope, cracked lids. But you've learned. You walk steady. You pad your jars with straw. You say a tiny prayer before every slippery bridge. Oddly, people envy your reliability. Farmers know your name. You always have a job. You never starve. While others beg for rice, you negotiate fertilizer contracts. Your job is smelly, sure, but it's clean in its own way. Predictable, balanced. At dawn, you reach the collection depot, a thatched storehouse on the city's edge. There your jars are weighed and emptied into larger tubs. You receive your payment, minus the cost of jars and any spillage. Then you clean the pots, rinse your sandals, and walk home as the city wakes. You've got time to nap, maybe eat a warm bowl of miso soup, and watch the sun rise over tile roofs and bamboo scaffolding. Children run past you without flinching. Merchants sweep their stoops. The world is orderly again, because you helped make it so. One last oddity. Your nickname in the neighborhood is often a respectful one. Shimo-san, or Mr. Soil. You carry something most wouldn't touch, and you turn it into something useful. You're not just hauling waste, you're closing a loop. The sun peeks through bamboo lattices as you finish rinsing out your clay jars, the city gently humming back to life. But you don't have time for tea or rest. Your robe is swapped for something stifling and smoky, and soon you're walking down a long corridor of echoing stone arches and gold-tipped staffs. You're now a papal incense bearer in the 11th century, and your job is to swing burning resin for hours while nobody looks directly at you. Unless you faint. Let's paint the scene. It's the heart of medieval Rome. The church is the center of political, spiritual, and architectural life. You stand in the Lateran Basilica, or Old St. Peter's, surrounded by chanting clergy, chanting monks, and sometimes actual chanting emperors. The vaults above you seem to disappear into incense clouds. That smoke, you're doing. You're part of the thurifers team, from thuribulum, the Latin word for censer. Your tool is a thick brass censer, hung on a long chain, filled with glowing coals and spoonfuls of incense, frankincense, myrrh, benzoin, and storax. These aren't cheap spices, they're imported from Africa, Arabia, and Asia, shipped over land and sea to bless medieval noses. You are not a priest. You're more like liturgical stage crew, quiet, precise, utterly vital, and completely overlooked unless you mess up. You swing the censer in slow arcs, releasing bursts of fragrant smoke that swirl around altars, candelabras, and important robes. It's not just ceremonial flair, it's spiritual symbolism. The smoke represents prayers rising to heaven. The more dramatic the cloud, the better the effect. And here's your secret: you're slightly choking the whole time. The censer burns hot, extremely hot. You hold it with a padded glove or a thick cloth, but your arm still aches. The chain digs into your hand. The weight swings with its own mind. You've learnt to guide it like a pendulum back forward. Arc pause timed perfectly with the hymns and steps of the procession. You start your day in the sacristy, preparing the coals. Not just lighting them, you have to choose the right coals. They must be dry, slow burning, and odorless until you add the resin. Damp coals sputter, wet ones pop and hiss, which makes monks flinch. You clean the censer first, scrubbing out old ash, buffing the brass. Then you test the balance of the chain. You do not want it flying off mid-swing. That actually happened once. There's a fringe story about a young incense bearer in Milan who lost control of the censer during High Mass. It flew across the nave, smacked a cardinal's leg, and extinguished 4 candles. No one laughed. He was reassigned to bell tower duty. Back to your task. You carry the censer in processions, sometimes for hours. Holy days, feast days, funerals, coronations. You're there, swinging smoke through crowds thick with breath and velvet and unspoken sins. You're often barefoot, the stone floors are cold, the air near the altar is warm from candles and sweat, and always, the incense. Historians still debate just how much incense was used in early medieval ceremonies. Some texts describe clouds so thick they blotted out the apse. Others suggest more modest usage. Either way, for you, it's enough to leave you coughing for days. You get used to the dizziness, or you faint. Both have happened. You wear a robe, not a fancy one. Simple linen or wool, cinched at the waist. Occasionally, a priest loans you a richer stole, but it's mostly symbolic. You walk behind the big hats. You light the air in front of them, and then you vanish back into shadow. And yet this job is in high demand. Why? Because it's a step up. Incense bearers are seen. Not spoken to, maybe, but seen. You move through sacred space. You learn Latin, at least enough to follow the Mass. You hear papal decrees before the crowds do. You might even catch the eye of a bishop who needs a new attendant or a scribe. There's also a strange spiritual prestige. Swinging the censer means you're part of the ritual. You're participating in Mass. You're drawing symbols in the air with smoke. Some even believe your movements affect how prayers ascend. That's a lot for a kid holding a hot metal ball. Still, it's exhausting. Your shoulders cramp. Your legs go numb during vigils. You sleep sitting up sometimes, clutching the chain like a comfort object. When you do dream, it's of smoke patterns, whirls and spirals, rising and vanishing. You forget what fresh air smells like. Sometimes, the incense makes your nose bleed. Sometimes your eyes water so badly that priests think you're moved by the Holy Spirit. You don't correct them. Let them think you're overcome with divine emotion. It's easier than explaining sinus inflammation. Once, after a long Easter vigil, you collapse behind the altar, face first in your own ash pile. They revived you with wine and a slap. You were back the next day. You're not thanked, but you're needed. And when the cathedral doors swing open, sunlight catches the last curling tendrils of your smoke, rising high into the rafters, carrying the unspoken prayers of 1,000 souls. That's your work. Invisible, sacred, hot, and very, very flammable. The incense fades into memory, your hands still tingling from the heat of the censer chain, as you're pulled from the silence of the cathedral and thrown into something much louder, more violent, and significantly more teethy. You are now in 17th century Mughal India, at the imperial court of a great emperor, but you are not a noble, or a poet, or a warrior. You are the animal baiter's assistant, and your job is to prepare half-dead goats for leopards, while the emperor and his friends watch and snack. Yes, this one's gonna be rough. Let's set the scene. The Mughal Empire is at its cultural peak. Opulent architecture, flattering art, intricate poetry, and a deep enthusiasm for dangerous animals. The emperors, from Akbar to Shah Jahan, maintained vast menageries of exotic beasts: elephants, lions, bears, panthers, and of course the Indian leopard. These weren't just pets. They were status symbols, sources of imperial entertainment, and sometimes instruments of punishment. And someone has to feed them. That someone, unfortunately, is you. Your job, to help stage baiting events, spectacles where powerful animals are pitted against helpless prey. The court gathers under silken canopies. Musicians play, platters of mango and rosewater sweets circulate, and you, sweating under your turban, are crouched behind a wooden gate, clutching a goat by the horns, and praying today's leopard isn't particularly bored. You're an assistant, which means you do the dirty work. You haul animals into the arena. You keep them restrained just long enough for the leopard to see them. You remove the splinters from their horns, sometimes paint them with red pigment to make the display more dramatic. You learn which goats panic and which just freeze. The freezing ones get nudged, and then release. The leopard bolts. You duck. The crowd gasps. The goat usually doesn't make it. This wasn't a back alley curiosity. Animal baiting was state-sponsored, performed for emperors, nobles, foreign ambassadors. It was theatre, and your job was the stagehand. You worked behind the curtains, or in your case, the bamboo screens. Historians still argue whether the Mughals truly saw baiting as spiritual or symbolic, or if it was just opulence taken to brutal extremes. Some court records describe it as a demonstration of control over nature. Others suggest it was simply a violent hobby, no different from European bear baiting or Roman gladiator games. Either way, you weren't asked for your opinion. The leopards? They're majestic, fast, silent, sometimes chained, sometimes free. You clean their cages in the morning, scooping waste, brushing fur, checking their claws for splits. One paw swipe can end you. You work carefully. You learn their names. You think one of them almost likes you. You hope. Sometimes, the animals don't cooperate. A leopard might wander instead of pounce. The goat might faint. You have to prod both, gently, firmly, quickly. If the emperor yawns, it reflects badly on everyone, especially you. You carry tools: rope, a prod stick, a curved knife, rarely used, and a bag of treats to coax the big cats. You never show fear, even though you're constantly afraid. There's no armor, no backup, just a courtyard full of nobles and a predator who might decide today's meal should walk on two legs. And here's the strange twist. People want your job. You work in the palace grounds. You eat the leftovers of royal banquets. You sleep near embroidered tents instead of gutters. Some see you as part of the entertainment crew, a theatrical wrangler with special access to the emperor's amusement. You even wear a badge of sorts, a sash dyed with indigo and crushed beetles. Fancy. But you're not really protected. If something goes wrong, an animal escapes, an ambassador is scratched, a goat bites a prince, you're the first to be blamed. There's a fringe story of an assistant who tripped during a release, spooked the leopard, and caused chaos in the women's viewing gallery. The emperor spared him barely, but demoted him to royal latrine watcher, which is just as unpleasant as it sounds. Still, there are upsides. You learn to move silently. You learn to listen to breath, to watch the twitch of a tail, to predict a strike. You become part animal yourself. Low, alert, ready to run. You can climb a palm tree in 3 seconds flat. You've dodged more claws than most soldiers have arrows. And the court respects that. In an awkward, half-mocking way. They call you Pantherhand or Goat Blesser. Some laugh, some nod, some genuinely admire your calm. After all, not everyone can tie a flower garland around a leopard's neck without losing an arm. At the end of the day, you help reset the court. You remove the bones. You clean the blood. You calm the surviving animals. You feed the falcons. You drag the remaining goats back to their pen. You do this without applause, without a thank you. But every now and then, the emperor looks your way, just for a second, and you feel 10 feet tall, until the next goat screams. The leopard's growl fades behind you, replaced by a silence so vast it rings in your ears. There are no musicians here, no embroidered tents, just wind, ice, and the dull crunch of your boots against frostbitten gravel. The sky hangs low and grey, and the cold cuts through your coat like needles. You're in Siberia, in the heart of the Soviet Gulag system, sometime in the 1930s, and you are an ice miner. This one doesn't even try to hide its misery. Let's begin with where you are. The Gulag, short for Glavnoy, or Pravlanye Lagere, or Main Camp Administration, was the sprawling network of forced labor camps scattered across the Soviet Union, especially in remote, unforgiving places like Kolyma, Magadan, and Vorkuta. It housed political prisoners, criminals, suspected enemies of the state, and ordinary people who'd said the wrong thing to the wrong person. Your job, handed to you with a shovel and a barked order, is to mine permafrost for frozen earth, gravel, and ice. Why? Because construction crews need it. Because some bureaucrat far away decided this outpost needed a road, a barracks, a hydroelectric dam, or maybe they just wanted to punish someone. Doesn't really matter. You did. Your day starts before the sun rises, though up here, in winter, the sun barely does. You're yanked from a freezing bunk in a barracks that smells of sweat, mildew, and despair. You pull on the same pair of padded trousers and mismatched gloves you've had for months. One boot leaks. Your socks froze days ago. No one has extras. Then it's out into the open, where the cold slaps you like a punishment. The snow crunches underfoot, crusted with old blood and urine. You form up with other prisoners, guards pacing nearby, with rifles and blank stares. One falls in the snow. He doesn't get back up. No one speaks. At the sight, you're handed a pickaxe and a shovel. You begin to dig. The ground is so frozen it might as well be stone. You chip. You hammer. You break off tiny chunks of frozen soil and ice, load them into wheelbarrows, and drag them to a collection point. Then you do it again, and again, for 12 hours. The cold is not the worst part. The monotony is. You lose track of days. Your fingers stop registering pain and start turning white. You hide your hands in your armpits to warm them between loads. The guards shout at you to keep moving. They'll beat you if you fall behind. You get one meal a day, a watery soup, if you're lucky, with a bit of potato or fish skin floating in it. Maybe 600 calories total, not enough to survive, let alone work. Some men trade food for favors, others steal, others collapse into snowbanks and never get up again. One man near you, a wiry former accountant from Leningrad, claims he once mined 1.2 tons of permafrost in a single day just to earn an extra chunk of bread. He shakes when he talks. No one doubts him. Historians still debate the true death toll of the Gulag system. Estimates range from 1.5 to 2 million, but it could be higher. Diseases ran rampant. Malnutrition was universal. The work was designed not just to extract labor, but to break you. If you survived the cold, the exhaustion got you. If you survived both, you were probably being watched. There's a fringe story, uttered only in whispers, of a man who carved miniature saints from blocks of ice at night, then buried them in the snow. A hidden chapel, frozen and unseen. Some say the guards found them and beat him to death. Others say they simply melted on their own. Nobody knows his name. Your boots fill with slush. Your toes go numb. You tape a scrap of cloth around your ankle to stop frostbite from spreading. It won't work. You'll lose at least one toe by spring, if you're still here. And yet, there are weird moments of beauty. The northern lights flicker above the horizon. The wind carves strange shapes into the drifts. Once you saw a fox watching you from a snowbank. Eyes bright, body still. It didn't run. It just blinked, as if to say, "You don't belong here." You agreed. Still, the demand for workers never drops. The Soviet state needs roads, mines, power, timber. You are a cog in a cold, grinding machine. And your silence, your ability to dig without protest, is your most valuable skill. Some men fake injuries to get kitchen duty. Others fake being mad, hoping for reassignment. But there's no escape. The train lines are too far, the forest's too thick, the frost is your fence, and the guards always watch. You count the days by injuries. Day 5, cracked fingernail. Day 12, cut your hand on the pickaxe. Day 22, watched a man collapse from hunger. Day 39, dug your own shallow trench, hoping it won't be needed for you just yet. At night, you sleep in waves, one eye open, your body shaking. You dream of warmth, of bread, of dirt that isn't frozen. In the morning, the whistle blows, and you pick up the shovel again. The shovel slips from your frozen hands. You blink snowflakes from your lashes and drag your feet back to the barracks, muscles screaming with fatigue. But now the frost fades, replaced by flickering orange light and a metallic taste in your mouth. You're surrounded by fire, smoke, and the constant ring of hammers. You've arrived in the Bronze Age, and your new role. You're a copper smelter, and your lungs will never forgive you. Let's set the scene. It's around 2500 BCE. You live in a small settlement near a copper-rich hillside, perhaps in the Anatolian Plateau, or the mountains of modern-day Iran. Your village consists of stone huts with thatched roofs, goats that won't shut up, and one very important building, the smelting hut. It's a crude structure made of clay and stone, half buried in the ground to trap heat, and inside it, you and a handful of others are about to turn raw earth into the material that fuels an age, bronze. Specifically, copper, one half of the magic alloy, the other being tin if you can find it. Your job begins with ore. You and others spend days hauling malachite or azurite, green and blue rocks that shimmer under sunlight from nearby hills. The ore is crushed with stone hammers until it's powdery, then mixed with charcoal and packed into clay crucibles. These are placed inside a pit furnace, and the fire is lit. But not just any fire. You need 1100 degrees Celsius to smelt copper. That's hot enough to melt lead, bake your eyebrows off, and cook you from the inside out if you get too close. How do you reach that temperature? With bellows, giant leather lungs operated by hand or foot. And who runs the bellows? You do. You and another apprentice take turns pumping air into the furnace, hour after hour, while smoke chokes the hut and sweat stings your eyes. The bellows wheeze and squeal, your arms burn, your tunic soaks through. If you stop, the temperature drops, and the entire batch of copper is ruined. You're terrified of making mistakes. Smelting is expensive, risky, and surprisingly spiritual. Your village believes the fire has a personality, dangerous, hungry, and prone to vengeance. If the metal fails to separate properly, it's not blamed on the weather or science. It's blamed on you. Maybe you weren't pure. Maybe you didn't fast long enough. Maybe the fire didn't like your face. Historians still argue how much spiritual ritual was involved in early metallurgy. Some say smelters were seen as priests. Others think they were more like respected craftsmen, dirty, but necessary. You know better. You're the one getting burned. Once the ore reaches melting point, the copper dribbles to the bottom of the crucible and hardens into ingots, small cakes of raw metal, ready to be hammered into tools, weapons, or jewelry. You extract them with tongs made of wood or bronze, if you're lucky, careful not to splash. Molten copper is beautiful, but it clings like betrayal. And then comes the hammering. You place the ingot on a stone anvil and strike it repeatedly to shape it. This process, called cold working, makes the copper harder. You alternate heating and hammering, watching for cracks. Every strike sends a vibration up your arm and into your spine. You don't wear gloves. You don't have eye protection. You just flinch a lot and hope you're fast enough to dodge sparks. There's a fringe story told around campfires. A smelter once forged a spear so perfect it sliced through a falling leaf midair. The village believed it was divine metal. The smelter demanded more food and rest. The chief refused. The smelter vanished. Later, a cave nearby was found lined with copper leaves. Maybe real. Maybe just the kind of story you tell to make the burning feel meaningful. You are respected. A little. When the tools are sharp and the axes balanced, people nod at you in the market. Warriors smile as they twirl new blades. Even the priests occasionally bless your hut, leaving charms near the entrance to keep spirits from messing with the fire. But you don't get wealth or safety. The fumes from the furnace, arsenic, lead, copper oxide, eat your lungs. You cough blood some mornings. Your teeth loosen. Your skin peels in strange patches. Some days you feel lightheaded before breakfast. You wonder if the metal is seeping into your bones. Still, this job is in demand. Everyone needs tools. Farmers, hunters, priests, even children. You're the engine of a new era. When people say the Bronze Age, they mean you, your soot-blackened face, your blistered hands, your half-finished hammer. And that copper, it glows orange when it pours, like the last light of the sun. You've stared into that glow so many times that it lives in your dreams now. You know its voice. You know its temper. You don't control the fire. You serve it. The forge dims behind you, the copper glow fading from your vision like a second sun sinking into soot. But there's no time to catch your breath. You blink, and when your eyes adjust, you're staring at a canvas of pale plaster, a chipped wooden brush in your hand, and a row of skulls in the corner, grinning back at you. Welcome to 14th century Florence. You are now an apprentice in a Plague-era art studio. Your job, paint halos on the dead. Try not to catch what killed them. Let's begin with context. The Black Death has returned. Again. It's swept through Europe in waves since the mid-1300s, and Florence is one of its favorite stops. The air is thick with incense and fear. Graves fill faster than stonecutters can carve. Clergy beg for divine intervention, and through all of it, one thing doesn't stop: art. But not just any art, plague art. Paintings of skeletons, saints, judgment, and suffering are in high demand. People want comfort, salvation, a reminder that someone, anyone, is still in control. Church commissions explode with images of Saint Sebastian, Saint Roch, and the Virgin Mary shielding the faithful from divine wrath. That's where you come in. You're not the master, you're the apprentice, the one who mixes pigments, preps frescoes, and paints the fiddly little details no one else wants. Like halos, and fingernails, and the yellow-green hue of plague-ridden skin. You arrive early to open the shutters, sweep the studio, and boil water for pigment. Your master, a cranky genius with wine breath and a permanent cough, is already sketching. He mumbles to himself, one eye twitching. He once painted for a pope, now he paints for whoever still has coin and a pulse. Your tasks include grinding lapis lazuli, for blue if you're lucky, mixing vermilion and egg yolk to make temperas, applying gold leaf halos using a squirrel hairbrush so fine it makes your hand cramp, copying the faces of saints from charcoal drawings to plaster walls. You work in silence mostly. Occasionally the master swears when his hand trembles, or when the plaster dries too fast. You nod and bring more limewash. There's a strange beauty to the work. The saints shimmer in gold. The angels float above earthly despair. But the bodies, they're all too real. You model plague victims after people you saw that morning. Faces slack with fever, hands clenched from muscle spasms. You paint ribs that poke from skin bruises blooming like purple flowers. You've seen those bruises before, on your neighbors, your cousins, maybe your master. Historians still argue how conscious medieval artists were of their surroundings. Did they see their work as journalism, theology, or therapy? You don't care. You just try to get the eyelids right before the lime set. One day, a priest brings in a skull. It belonged to a martyr, he says. You place it on a shelf near the brushes. You're not convinced it was a martyr. It's got gold teeth. Still, you sketch it daily. You become good at skulls and bones and the vacant stares of plague saints who look suspiciously like your old school teacher. You don't wear gloves or masks. Your master tells you to rub garlic on your chest and hang rosemary on the door. You do both. The garlic does nothing. The rosemary wilts. The fear lives in the gaps between brushstrokes. But weirdly, this job is popular. Artists are dying, and survivors are in demand. Even apprentices like you. If you can paint halos that don't drip, you'll get work. If you can sketch a foot without using a model, you're golden. Some nights you paint funerary panels, small portraits of the dead, surrounded by angels. The families coming crying, pressing silver coins into your master's palm. Make her look peaceful, they whisper. You try. You always try. One fringe story floats around the studio, of an apprentice who painted himself into every fresco. A saint here, a martyr there. When the plague came for him, the priests claimed his soul was already immortalized, and so he lived, possibly just wishful thinking. But you've started painting yourself into crowd scenes. Just a little. A hand here. A nose there. You dream in pigment now. Ochre, umber, vermilion, the colors of suffering, of transcendence, of hope, oddly enough. Because sometimes, in the late afternoon light, when the gold halos gleam and the plaster holds and your master doesn't cough for a whole hour, it feels like something matters, like the art is a kind of defiance, a way of saying, we're still here, for now. You set down your brush, the smell of linseed oil still clinging to your sleeves, and step into the cool night air of Florence. But now the candlelight is gone, replaced by the flicker of torches and the distant clatter of chains. You hear chanting, no shouting, and your nose fills with the pungent reek of unwashed wool, sweat and a hint of burning metal. You are no longer a painter. You are a galley-rowing slave in Renaissance Venice. And your job? Row until your hands bleed, and then row some more. Let's start with the setting. It's the 16th century. Venice is at its maritime peak. Merchant princes in masks, shimmering lagoons, and floating palaces. But behind the silken glass is a navy built on brutal muscle. The galley, a long, oared warship, dominates Mediterranean waters. It glides with eerie speed, turns on a coin, and crushes enemy hulls like firewood. That elegance. It's powered by human backsides, chained to benches. Like yours. Venice, unlike some of its rivals, used a mix of prisoners, convicts, and conscripts to crew its galleys. You're likely here because you broke a law, offended the wrong noble, or got caught stealing bread. Some galley slaves were political prisoners. Others were poor men given a choice, the cell or the oar. You chose poorly. Your seat is a narrow wooden bench, just wide enough for your hips, set about halfway down the galley's hull. You share it with two others. You each hold a length of oar that weighs more than a grown dog, and extends out into the sea like a limb you didn't ask for. You're chained by the ankle, not metaphorically, literally. The chain is short enough to keep you seated, long enough to let you stagger to the latrine, if you ask first. The drum beats. That's your heartbeat now. Boom, boom. You row in rhythm, arms shaking, spine curled like a question mark. The sweat from the man beside you soaks into your sleeve. No one speaks. You can't hear over the crashing surf, the whip cracks, the creaking timbers. Your skin splits early, within the first few days. Blisters become open sores. The salt air stings every wound. The bench gives you splinters you can't dig out. You lean into the oar, because if you falter, the overseer notices. He walks the deck with a knotted whip and a long wooden staff. The staff is for poking the lazy. The whip is for everything else. The food is worse than bad. It's irrelevant. A bowl of thin gruel, maybe a slice of bread. If you're lucky, a boiled onion. If not, nothing. Water is rationed. Wine is sometimes offered, not as kindness, but as fuel. And sleep? When the galley stops, you sleep on the bench, still chained, sometimes with rats, sometimes with lice, always with pain. One historian called the galley oar the anvil of empire. Others argue whether the Venetian navy was more humane than its Spanish or Ottoman counterparts. Some point to the free oarsman program, where desperate men volunteered for pay. Others note that many slaves were never freed, and the death rate could reach 50% per voyage. You've seen it. The man beside you collapsed last week. They unchained him, dragged him to the edge, and tossed him over. You didn't ask his name. You didn't have to. There's a rhythm to the row that becomes your mind. You think in pills. You dream in oar strokes. Sometimes, when the waves are calm and the sun's low on the horizon, it feels like you're not rowing a ship, but rowing time itself forward. And then you hit a storm, or a naval battle, or worse, a harbor sprint. That's when the pace doubles. The whip cracks more, the drum pounds like thunder, your hands slip, your back screams. You've never moved faster in your life. You've never hurt more. You've never felt less human. But here's the paradox. This job is valuable. The galley cannot sail without you. You are essential, powerful. You move a warship with nothing but pain and timing. The rich nobles and flashy captains toast their victories because of you. And you don't even see the ports. Once in a while, a miracle happens. A man is freed. Maybe he rode for 5 years without collapse. Maybe he saved a captain's life. Maybe someone powerful took pity. It's rare, but it happens. You tell yourself that, over and over. There's a fringe tale passed from oar to oar, of a chained man who rode through 4 campaigns, earned his freedom, then returned as a drummer. They say he beat the drum slower than anyone else. Let the others rest. Let them breathe. No one knows if it's true, but you listen for that drum. Every day, the drum fades. Your blisters pulse with each heartbeat, and your legs finally stretch straight for the first time in days. But now the sea spray vanishes, and you blink into the flickering half-dark of a 19th century coal mine in Wales. You're no longer rowing, you're crawling, face down through a passage just big enough for a sheep. You are now a trapper boy, and your job is to open and close a single door in the blackness. All day, every. Let's set the scene. It's the mid-1800s. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. Coal fuels everything. Factories, locomotives, cities. And deep below the Welsh hills, thousands of men and boys dig out the black gold that makes the empire run. You are one of the youngest. You're not old enough to swing a pick, not big enough to haul coal carts, but you're just the right size for the job that no one else wants. Trapping. Your job is to sit in total darkness for 12 hours straight, beside a low wooden door called a trapdoor. These doors help control airflow in the mines, channeling fresh air into the working areas and pushing out toxic gases. If left open, the whole mine could fill with fire damp, a flammable gas that turns tunnels into powder kegs. So your job? Keep it shut, unless a cart comes. Then you open it, then shut it again, and wait. You're about 6 years old, maybe 7. Your clothes are rags. Your boots leak. You carry a small tin lunchbox, maybe with some bread and cheese, and a candle stub for light. But candles are expensive, so you often just sit in the dark, and the dark is complete. No glimmer, no shadows, just nothing, for hours. Sometimes you hum, sometimes you talk to yourself, sometimes you listen, rats dripping water, distant picks. You know the sound of a cart's wheels long before the light reaches you. When it comes, you stand, pull the rope, open the trapdoor, let the cart pass, shut it, sit back down, repeat, all day. Some trapper boys go weeks without seeing daylight. You go home covered in coal dust, coughing, eyes aching. Then you come back and do it again. Historians still argue how early children entered the mines. Some say as young as 4, others claim the average was closer to 8. What's not in dispute is that children made up 15–20% of the mining workforce during this period. They were small, cheap, and unlikely to complain. You're paid a few pennies a week, barely enough to help your family buy food. But without your wages, your mother goes hungry. So you work, and try not to cry, and hope the roof above you doesn't groan too loudly. Cave-ins happen. So does black damp, a buildup of carbon dioxide that slowly suffocates you. One moment you're sitting still, the next you're lightheaded, then gone. Other boys say they saw someone slump forward midday, thought he was asleep. He wasn't. There's a fringe tale of a trapper boy who trained a rat to sit on his knee. The rat, they said, would twitch if the air turned bad. More reliable than the canaries miners used later, probably false. But in this place, even imaginary company is welcome. Your candle, if you get one, burns out in 2 hours. You mark time by hunger, by thirst, by the ache in your knees. Your fingernails turn black from the coal dust and never go back. You can't scrub it off. Your skin cracks. Your eyes stay red. And yet, this job is sought after. Because it's a way in. If you trap long enough, you might become a putter, someone who pushes coal carts, then a hurrier, then a face worker, then a miner. You rise by surviving, by growing, by not getting crushed or suffocated before your voice deepens. The mine manager might learn your name, might even pat your head. One day, you might walk home in a clean shirt. There's no glory, no ladder made of gold, just tiny victories. A good lunch, a candle that lasts longer than usual, a kind word from the cart driver who tosses you a sweet before rolling past. You dream in darkness now, not of monsters or ghosts, but of your own voice, echoing back at you, of the door creaking open, of coal carts rattling by, of finally standing up and walking forward into light. Until then, you sit and wait, because the next cart is coming. The door creaks shut behind the last coal cart, and the blackness folds in again, thick and silent. But now, the darkness lifts, not into daylight, but into neon. You blink. The air smells like oil and stale sugar. A faint buzz hums above your head, not from insects or wires, but from arcade machines. You're in 1980s Japan, and you're not mining, trapping, or hauling. But make no mistake, you're still at work. You are a Tokyo pachinko parlor attendant, and your job is to keep a million tiny metal balls flowing and to gently usher broken dreams toward the exit. Let's set the scene. The Japanese pachinko industry in the 1980s is massive. Imagine a cross between a pinball machine and a slot machine, crammed into row after row of blinking, buzzing cabinets. Patrons, mostly middle-aged men, sit hunched at machines, chain-smoking and staring into the noisy abyss for hours hoping to hit a jackpot. But behind the bells and balls is you, the unsung janitor, mediator, and referee of Tokyo's most surreal workplace. You arrive just before opening. The parlor is dead silent. Momentarily, you walk past aisles of machines that seem to twitch even while off. You grab your tray, a shallow plastic bin, and start wiping down the glass fronts with alcohol, fingerprints, ash, sweat. You move fast. Everything has to look pristine before the storm hits. Then the doors open. In comes the flood. Patrons swarm in, each with 1,000 yen note and the same tight-lipped expression. They don't talk. They don't smile. They just buy metal balls. Hundreds of them, loaded into trays, poured into machines, and launched one after another in a kind of rapid-fire boredom ritual. And when something jams, when the machine eats balls, when the tray gets too heavy, that's when they raise a hand. And that's when you run. You're wearing a uniform, usually a vest, clip-on tie, and white gloves. You carry tools, a screwdriver, extra trays, and a cloth to mop up spilled drinks or balls. The metal balls, by the way, are sacred. Each one is worth a fraction of a yen, but in volume, they're currency. You count them by hand. Your brain learns the weight of a full tray like second nature. And the noise, it never stops. Each machine buzzes, clinks, rings, and flashes. Now multiply that by 200 machines in one room. Add the constant coughs of chain smokers, the occasional cheer, the rare guttural sob. You live inside a metallic windstorm. You breathe cigarette smoke for 8 hours straight. You go home reeking of ash and sweat and sugar water. You keep a tiny fan in your pocket, hoping for a breeze that never comes. Your job is weirdly specific. Bull jam. You fix it. Drunk customer shouting. You call your supervisor, bow, apologize. Someone hits a jackpot. You carry the payout tray, full of hundreds of balls, to the counter with a perfect expression. Not too happy. Don't mock their luck. Not too flat. Don't risk offending them. There's a fringe story of a pachinko attendant who smiled too brightly during a jackpot handoff. The winner thought he was being mocked. An argument followed. A tray of balls was thrown. Nobody knows what happened to the attendant. You keep your smile neutral. And here's the twist. People want this job. Why? Because it's steady. It pays better than convenience stores. You don't need a degree. And there's a strange dignity in surviving a full shift without losing your mind. You belong to a team. You wear the badge. You move with purpose. But it's relentless. On big nights you might handle 10,000 metal balls. You sweep them from floors. You refill trays. You guide the regulars back to their machines when they stagger off to throw up or cry in the bathroom. And the gambling. It's not technically gambling. Japan had tight laws against direct payouts, so players would win prizes, cigarette lighters, chocolate, small trinkets, and then coincidentally exchange those outside the parlor for cash at a separate window. You know it's a loophole. Everyone does. But no one talks about it. You once saw a man play the same machine for 6 hours straight, not speaking, barely blinking. His entire paycheck turned into clinking steel spheres. When he finally won, he didn't cheer. He just stared at the payout like it owed him something. You handed him the tray. He didn't look at you. You bowed anyway. One night, the power flickered. The whole parlor stuttered, then went dark. You heard actual silence for the first time in months. It lasted 5 seconds. Someone coughed. Then everything roared back to life. You almost cried. You're not poor. You're not rich. You're just there. Part of a ritual that swallows men whole, spills them back out, and demands that you hand them a hand towel and smile. You finish your shift at midnight. You count the trays. You wipe down the glass. One last time. You step into the Tokyo night, blinking at the quiet, wondering how anything can be so loud and so sad at the same time. But the parlor will open again tomorrow, and you'll be there. You step out of the neon haze and into the chill of early morning. Tokyo fades behind you. Smoke, sweat, and steel, all left in the hum of automatic doors. But you don't walk far. Just a few steps into the past, the world shifts again. Dimmer, more muffled, and built not of circuits or coal, but parchment and paranoia. You're in 17th century Massachusetts. And your new role? You're not just working. You're surviving. You are the apprentice scribe to a witch trial clerk in Salem. Let's draw back the curtain. The year is 1692. Salem village is aflame. Not literally, but spiritually. Fear grips the town like frostbite. Neighbors eye each other with suspicion. Girls scream and faint in church. Ministers thunder from pulpits, and the air is thick with something you can't name. Something old, bitter, and hungry. Your job is to record it all. You're seated at a narrow table inside a crude wooden courtroom, a quill in your hand, and a jar of ink that's already half frozen. You're not important, not yet. You're not the judge, not the minister, not the accuser. You're just the one who writes, and listens, and tries to not blink wrong in front of the wrong people. You work for the court clerk, a tired man with ink-stained cuffs and a tendency to mutter scripture under his breath. He shows you how to keep the margins neat, how to phrase the accusations, how to spell familiar spirit without hesitation. He never tells you how to sleep afterward. The trials are fast, fevered, surreal. You watch people dragged in barefoot, accused of dancing in moonlight with Satan, of speaking in strange tongues, of turning milk sour with a glance. You don't believe it. Maybe, but your job isn't to question. It's to write, and you write everything. You record confessions wrung from sleep-starved mouths, testimonies from sobbing children, recollections of invisible birds and ghostly cats. You log the signatures. You press wax seals. You copy names onto warrants. Each word you write might end someone's life. Historians still argue whether the judges and scribes of Salem believed what they recorded, or if the trials were theater, superstition, control. But in this courtroom, it doesn't matter what you believe. You just keep writing. Keep surviving. You learn fast. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look too long at the accused. And whatever you do, don't sneeze during prayer. The trials move quickly. The records are kept in bound leather ledgers. You blot them with sand. You rub the ink with the hem of your shirt. You run your fingers over words like gallows and confession and spectre. And all the while, you feel eyes on you. Not just the judges or the guards, but the ones in the pews, the ones in the back, clutching shawls and whispering into their knuckles. The ones who might say your name next. You once saw a woman accuse her own servant just to avoid being named herself. The girl screamed she was innocent. You wrote it down. You spelled her name wrong. You never corrected it. One fringe story claims a clerk's apprentice swapped two names in a trial record, accidentally or on purpose, and got a woman executed instead of her brother. The clerk found out. He burned the page. They never spoke of it again. But you wonder. You're not paid much. A bit of bread, some dried apples, the occasional coin from a grateful family, grateful that they're not the ones in the dock. And yet, this job is in demand. It means you're literate, that you're useful, that you're inside the courthouse instead of standing outside it with your hands bound. You get to sit, to write, to breathe, most of the time. But you hear the whispers, that apprentices are easy scapegoats, that if a name goes missing, a confession is lost, a seal breaks, you'll be blamed. You don't sleep well. You dream of ink that won't dry, of parchment that bleeds when touched, of gallows where the ropes are made of sentences you copied by hand. And still, you return. Because it's better to write the fire than to be burned in it. Because survival sometimes means telling the story, even if the story is a lie. And now, let the candles burn low. Let the parchment curl at the edges. Let the clang of chains, the snap of whips, the rumble of carts and cries of the accused fade into soft, distant echoes. You've traveled far tonight, through mud and flame, through smoke and darkness, across frozen tundra and beneath vaulted cathedrals. You've swung incense and oars, carried buckets of lime, balanced trays of hopes, hauled lives cleaned after deaths, and handed over cups of coffee that could kill. The jobs were real, the pain was constant, the reward, often nothing more than survival. But you made it. You made it through the scalding fire of a smelter's hut and the crushing cold of Siberia, through the drip of mine tunnels and the gasping silence of plague pits, through the courtrooms of paranoia and the temples of forgotten gods. You bore the weight of empire, filth, flame, and fear, not as a king or a general, but as the ones who kept it all running. Quietly, invisibly, unseen. And now, the torchlight dims, the ink runs dry, the crowds go home. There are no drums left to row to, no goats left to drag, no doors to trap or carts to push, just the stillness of breath, the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the feeling of your own weight slowly softening into the bed. Tonight you won't have to open any more trapdoors. You won't need to scrub away blood, or dodge a whip, or guess what poison lies in your cup. All you have to do now is rest. Let the centuries settle like dust. You've done your work. Close your eyes. You're safe here. Good night.